Chapter 1034. Miracle City had several times more undead towers than before the war, and there were 2 more smart brains monitoring the city's life fluctuations. Not to mention Miracle City had large amounts of powerful Treants and many elven experts. Their defensive power could not be compared to before. Therefore it was very difficult to sneak into Miracle City and launch an attack. Now that these ambushers could sneak past the outer layer and bypass the Trent's defenses, it was enough to show that they were not ordinary people. When Meng Yingying was taken away by Chu Tian, she immediately released her mirror source spirit and released the power of the spatial mirror dagger. The 2 of them instantly disappeared. Meng Yingying's innate spatial energy was not her own, so she couldn't control her direction at all. Adding in the urgency of the situation, she directly teleported several miles away, just temporarily escaping from the assassins. The entire process happened in a split second. She didn't even know what the ambushers looked like. Of course the other side didn't have time to chase them. Chu Tian said in a surprised voice, "Your reaction is quite fast. So dangerous, how could there be assassins sneaking into Miracle City?" Meng Yingying quickly said, "I have to have Zero send people to protect elder sister, otherwise it would be too dangerous for these people to hide in Miracle City." Before she even finished speaking, the spatial energy was in chaos. Several powers arrived and several masked people surrounded the 2 of them. There was no aura coming from them at all. They were clearly experts that could hide their auras. They also used spatial energy. Innate spatial energy users. There was not even 1 in 10 million innate spatial energy users. No matter what country or power it was, they were priceless treasures, and all of them were focused on training. This kind of precious and rare talent was given this kind of dangerous task. They didn't hesitate to risk their lives to kill Chu Tian. This was definitely a price that only the top forces at the level of giants were willing and able to pay. Even paying this kind of large price to assassinate him. This showed how much importance they placed on Chu Tian. Where did these scoundrels come from, actually coming to Miracle City? Meng Yingying didn't need the other side to make a move to feel how strong these assassins were. Their cultivations far surpassed Chu Tian and her, therefore they wanted to stall for time. No matter how skilled they were in sneaking in, once Zero found a strange situation, he would immediately call for help. In at most a minute, it would be hard for them to escape. But these assassins were much more experienced than Meng Yingying imagined. How could Meng Yingying's trick them? Before they even said 2 words, a black-robed masked person released his power. Chu Tian and Meng Yingying felt the space around them turn into a paste. There was an invisible chain that they couldn't break free of that instantly locked down the entire space, making it impossible for them to move. That's right. It was him. An innate spatial energy user. This was not a normal restriction, but rather a spatial level restriction. With Chu Tian and Yingying's cultivation and strength, unless they were stronger than the other side, forcefully interfering with the space to make the restriction ineffective, it was impossible for them to escape. However, this assassin with innate spatial energy was at least in the 7th to 8th true spirit layer. This was a true spirit transformation expert. The 2 of them completely lost the ability to move. The other black-clothed man released his source spirit and a large amount of black energy rose up, instantly condensing into a black cloud above his head. This black cloud covered the entire area in a very short period of time. Darkness attributed source spirit. It was another rare source spirit. It was no wonder they could smoothly sneak in. The darkness could block detection, and with the spatial energy's ability to move, even if Miracle City's warning system was several times stronger, the result would be the same. The black cloud could block other people's senses, so even if Miracle City sent reinforcements, they wouldn't be able to find them in a short period of time. They could only rely on themselves now. The problem now was that the experts surrounding Chu Tian and Meng Yingying were all existences with terrifying strength. Spatial source spirits and darkness source spirits, perhaps they were all experts in the spirit transformation realm. The other 4 were slightly weaker, but they were still existences in the peak 6th true spirit layer. In other words, any one of their cultivations far surpassed Chu Tian and Meng Yingying. Kill. The 6 assassins cooperated flawlessly. The spatial expert blocked and the darkness expert blocked. The 4 assassins attacked and the 6 of them moved at the same time. In this situation, even a peak 9th true spirit layer expert would find it hard to escape. In this extremely dangerous moment, Chu Tian suddenly turned golden and the 6 black-robed assassins were invaded by a terrifying divine sense at the same time. This divine sense was definitely the strongest they had ever encountered in their lives. It seemed like the divine sense also contained this kind of power as the 6 of them were covered in blue and white flames at the same time. Netherworld Ghost Flame. Chu Tian's netherworld flame was no longer a normal netherworld flame, it had been nurtured by the Spirit King's body for 10,000 years. It had swallowed the abyss hell flame, swallowed the black flames of death, and swallowed the ice spirit sacred flame from the ice eye. The netherworld flame was not something normal people could imagine. Even if the 6 of them had thick spirit energy and cultivated protective secret techniques, they couldn't ignore it. Ah! The 4 weaker black-robed assassins were frozen in place by the divine sense and their protective spirit energy was destroyed. The flames crawled into their bodies like maggots in their bones. The 4 of them woke up and had to give up their attacks. They used escape techniques at the same time, barely escaping this calamity. Divine sense could also contain physical attacks. This was just too shocking. The dark experts were very fast and countless dark clouds gathered to form a current that flooded at Chu Tian. Chu Tian could feel that this was a flow of dark energy. It had all the characteristics of dark attributed energy, corroding, swallowing, and polluting. If they were submerged by this energy, Chu Tian and Meng Yingying would die without a doubt. The spatial expert's reaction wasn't slow either. The spatial energy around him became even stronger and a chain covered in spatial runes appeared, which was the image of his source spirit. Spatial chain source spirit, no wonder it had such a strong restraining power. In terms of source spirit strength, this person's source spirit wasn't strong, but because it was a rare spatial attributed source spirit, it was very precious. Otherwise, if it was Vivian with a spatial source spirit that was close to a god-level source spirit, there was nothing in this world that couldn't be cut apart. Chu Tian would have been cut into several pieces by the spatial energy. The spatial expert's power became stronger and the spatial chain began to twist like a snake. This power seemed like it wanted to pierce through space and nail Chu Tian and Meng Yingying to death. Chu Tian and Meng Yingying were still bound by the spatial energy, not being able to move at all. Meng Yingying's face turned pale, this situation wasn't good. But at this moment, Chu Tian gave a cold snort and his golden eyes indifferently looked at the assassin. Endless purgatory. The spatial expert was shocked to find that everything around him had disappeared. When he came back to his senses, he was in a scorching desert, and most of his body was buried in the boiling yellow sand, unable to move. This was because a large number of ants had appeared in the surrounding sand dunes, and each ant was the size of a fingernail. Illusion technique. Spiritual illusion technique. The spatial expert knew that he had fallen into a spiritual illusion technique, but he had no way of escaping it. Tens of thousands of ants flooded over like a tide, entering his eyes, nose, mouth, as well as any place on his body that could be burrowed. There were some that couldn't find any holes, so they bit through his flesh to burrow in. In just a few short minutes, his entire body was filled with bloodthirsty ants. These ants didn't just eat his flesh and organs, they even bit his bones bit by bit. The pain of 10,000 ants biting his body was worse than any cruel torture. When he couldn't take it anymore and thought it was over, suddenly, everything disappeared. He was buried once again, but his body in the sand had become two. Both bodies had senses and he seemed to realize something as his eyes quickly became filled with fear. As expected, the ant tide appeared once again and everything was repeated. This time he had to endure double the pain. Then 4 times, 8 times, 16 times, 100 times, 1,000 times, 10,000 times, 100,000 times. This spatial expert already didn't remember how long he had been in the infinite reincarnation spiritual space. With this repeated and deepening torture, his mind had already been completely destroyed. Ah! In reality, Chu Tian only took a glance at him before blood flowed from his 7 orifices and he fell to the ground, dead. Chu Tian's eyes returned to their normal color because launching this kind of attack consumed a lot of his energy. He couldn't use his divine sense for now. This kind of troublesome spatial expert had died for no reason. No matter how high the quality of these assassins was, they still wouldn't be able to accept this fact, so they were stunned for a moment. It was in this moment that Chu Tian regained his mobility. Chu Tian recovered his mobility and immediately gathered his strength, turning his eyes white. Phaseless sword finger. The dark attributed expert felt a cold killing intent enveloping him. In his panic, he used all his strength to resist, but it was all in vain. His head flew off like a dandelion. 2 spirit transformation experts had actually died in Chu Tian's hands. The strangest thing was that no one knew what Chu Tian had done. The 2 of them seemed to have died for no reason. When the other 4 assassins saw this, they didn't dare continue fighting. They had seriously underestimated Chu Tian's strength, so they immediately used their evasion technique to escape. The 4 of them flew in different directions, thinking that they could escape without a trace. Suddenly, the earth rumbled. 4 thick and sharp tree roots soared into the sky, piercing through their protective spirit energy like paper. The 4 peak experts didn't have the ability to resist at all as they were pierced to death by the tree roots. Was it Cenarius? He could sense what happened here from the miracle gardens. Chu Tian revealed a smile. Even if he couldn't beat them, these assassins couldn't have successfully assassinated them. After a while, the various experts of Miracle City arrived. The Elven King also arrived with Vivian, but the battle on this side was already over. The entire process was short, but there was no danger. But now, it was worth pondering who sent these fellows here. Chapter 1035. Miracle City's City Lord's Castle was holding a general meeting. The company's development had reached a turning point, so the focus of this meeting was to summarize the past and discuss the future. Meng Qingwu was wearing the City Lord's robe as she sat in the Vice City Lord's seat. Her beautiful and dignified face was very serious. There were several dozen people present. Other than the various tribe leaders and Dongfang Haoran and several generals, the rest were all peerless beauties. Not only were they very young, they each had their own merits and they all had serious expressions. At this time, a relaxed voice suddenly broke the heavy atmosphere in the meeting room. Hey! Yun Yao! Feng Kaidai! Why are you back? Chu Tianjing walked in from the side door and immediately saw 2 people he hadn't seen in a long time. It was Yun Yao and Feng Kaidai. They were both high-level members of Miracle Commerce, but they had been working in Oldman's small town for a long time. Chu Tian was very surprised. When were you transferred back to the headquarters? I didn't even know. Feng Kaidai was still gentle and elegant, looking like a very cultured young miss from the outside. This kind of temperament made people feel like they were bathing in a spring breeze. Seeing Chu Tian, she revealed a gentle smile. There are no more big matters in Oldman's small town, it's enough for Yun Yao's little brother Yun Xiao to take care of things. We received elder sister Qingwu's transfer order and while the Oldman transport tower was completed 2 days ago, we came with Yun Yao to help. Yun Yao glared at Chu Tian and her voice was filled with sarcasm. We've been in the city for a few days and you've only shown yourself now. You're truly a free and easy city lord. You're misunderstanding me by saying this. Actually, I'm very diligent normally, I'm not in closed-door cultivation right now. When Chu Tian said this, Meng Yingying and Nan Gongyun rolled their eyes. Meng Qingwu also fiercely glared at him, but Chu Tian did not have the slightest awareness, but the 2 beauties came from afar. It's my fault that I wasn't able to welcome you in time. Since it's like this, why are we having a meeting? Come, let's go drink. Sir City Lord. Finance Minister Dolores unhappily stood up. This normally flirtatious vixen, at this moment she looked even more serious than Meng Qingwu. With a serious and reproachful tone, she said, today's meeting is very important. Even if you don't help us, don't cause trouble, okay? Sorry, I was too excited. Chu Tian felt bored and sat down. Crossing his legs, he said to the young miss, "Let's begin." Meng Qingwu said, "Let's start with the production department." The production department was a very important department, so naturally it had to be managed by the most trustworthy person. Minister Meng Yingying quickly took out the prepared documents. "Our Miracle Commerce's production department has done very well in the past month. We have completed an average of 20% of our production tasks and have built over 50 new factories, with 2/3 of them in the Forest of Chaos. Other than that, we are combining with smart brains to develop intelligent manufacturing." Currently, Meng Yingying spoke of a large amount of data and explained the situation in detail. She also introduced the future production plans and specific tasks. She spoke very smoothly, making Chu Tian look at her in a new light. Meng Qingwu gave her advice after listening. Meng Yingying quickly recorded it down. "All right." Chu Tian applauded in an exaggerated manner. "Miracle Commerce has a smart and capable commander like Yingying. Our production line can definitely be guaranteed." Meng Yingying's face turned red. She didn't actually do anything because her elder sister had given her 2 smart brains. These were all collected and analyzed by smart brains. Even the production plans and tasks were given by smart brains. Meng Yingying just summarized and gave her opinion. Her elder sister was in charge of the overall situation, so she didn't need to plan anything herself. "Our production department is very smooth and our research is already on the right track. We are currently developing in an orderly manner, so I'll first show everyone the related projects." Meng Qingwu waved her hand and a large screen fell down, revealing a busy factory. "Look, this is Miracle Commerce's newest spaceship base. We've recruited large amounts of people and invested large amounts of resources and money, preparing to create a large-scale weapon that can dominate future battles. Because it is too complex, it will take a year to complete." A year? This was indeed a bit long. But this kind of complex large-scale weapon was not something that could be completed in a short period of time. Meng Yingying quickly said, "The production department will immediately prepare the related factories. Once the spaceships are developed, they can be produced as soon as possible." The second screen fell down at this time. Meng Qingwu said to the scene inside, "This is the new source energy weapons research room. The company has recruited large amounts of experienced mechanical masters from the Great Zhou country. The Yun sect, and I believe that the mechanical armors of these mechanical masters are very valuable. If we can modify it with Miracle Commerce's technology, we can use source energy batteries to power it, add in source energy shields, source energy swords, and source energy weapons. We can create a source energy fighter mech." While she was speaking, another screen appeared with the design. Meng Qingwu looked at Chu Tian. "What does the mayor think?" "This design is not bad." Chu Tian looked at it for a bit. "I believe that once the mech armor is developed, even the weakest soldier can become an expert. But I suggest we strengthen it further. For example, we can add a power engine to the mech armor, making it even faster and stronger. It would be best if we can add flying equipment, so our mech armor soldiers can freely fly in the sky. We can even add a smart brain to each mech armor, allowing us to fight with information." Meng Qingwu quickly waved her hand to stop him. "Stop, stop, stop. Does the young miss have anything better to add? Although your suggestion is very good, it is too far away from reality." Meng Qingwu said with a sigh, "Miracle Commerce's basic problem is that we don't have enough funds, so we can't develop this high-level mech armor right now. Even if we can develop a normal mech armor, it would be hard to mass-produce it. At most we can equip it with elite troops. We lack money. It can't be." Chu Tian had a look of disbelief. "Didn't we just borrow over 100,000 source stones from the Eternal Forest not long ago? The funds have already been filled, and with the company's income, we can't maintain this little bit of research funding. City Lord, you really don't know the cost of food without managing the household." The finance minister Dolores couldn't sit still. "Do you know how much resources are needed to develop this mech armor? Our current budget is 300,000 source stones. As for the airship budget, it is a terrifying number. As for the Gnome and Yun sect laboratories, they are spending more and more every month, just like a bottomless pit. Not to mention that we have just conquered the Warhounds Plains and the Great Zhou country, we still need to take out large amounts of source stones to invest in these areas. How many people in the Miracle City area are queuing up to apply for loans? With our current financial situation, it is very difficult. Chu Tian's head swelled hearing this. What the hell? They actually spent this much money? We have many projects right now. Other than the Miracle Shopping Center and the Spiritual Energy Network, there are many other projects that need to be deployed. Meng Qinggu lowered a few more screens and pointed at one of them as she said, for example, this city defense system task. We plan to build missile silos in the hidden mountains around Miracle City, creating a long-range military force. Other than that, we are also preparing to build giant source energy cannons in the mountains to deal with enemies in the future. Chu Tian felt more depressed the more he heard. Father always thought that Miracle Commerce was a monster that could make money. As long as they fixed the holes in front of them, they wouldn't need to worry about money at all. Looking at the current situation, not only did Miracle Commerce lack money, it wasn't just a little bit. Although we need a lot of money, everyone doesn't need to be discouraged. Meng Qinggu saw that everyone's morale was a bit low. As the Vice City Lord, she immediately encouraged them. Miracle Commerce's profit potential is very large, but our current business is limited to the Great Summer Country and a few tribes in the forest. Moreover, the entire market hasn't been opened yet. There are currently several transport towers in the forest and we are cooperating with the Eternal Forest. In the future, we will be doing business with several elven cities and tribes. Other than that, with the Great Zhou country and the Northern Militant country as the foundation, we will be expanding to the surrounding countries. The investment now is not small, but the returns in the future will be even larger. Chu Tian nodded, that's right, there are several small towns in the forest and the Great Summer country. How many markets can there be here? We need to expand our territory. We need to speed up our plans. The powers in the Savage Highlands are still restless and there are too many variables, we can't slowly develop. Meng Qinggu began to make arrangements. Yun Yao, Kai Dai, you two will take over Dolores's work and work for the Miracle Shopping Center and foreign trade. You two have experience, so there shouldn't be any problems. This is the map of the forest cities and underground cities I prepared for you, as well as the general information of these cities, including the large tribes nearby. Miracle City will give you enough caravans and people, you just need to be in charge of dealing with them. This task was not light at all. Feng Kaidai was appointed as the foreign minister. Yun Yao was appointed as the commerce minister. The two of them immediately stood up, we will definitely do a good job. Chu Tian asked another question, what about our chief financial officer Dolores? Miracle City's commerce minister was Dolores in the past and the Fox People's caravans were established by Dolores. Now that the foreign trade and commerce matters were given to Feng Kaidai and Yun Yao, wouldn't Dolores have nothing to do? This seductive fox's abilities were not weak, so it was a pity that she was left idle in the city. Meng Qinggu replied, Miracle Commerce's biggest problem right now is the lack of money. Dolores has another important task, so she will focus on developing miracle banking from today onwards. Dolores nodded, I asked the city lord to be assured, the current Miracle City citizens already have a high enough trust in us. Ever since we introduced the citizen card and established the personal savings business, Miracle Banking's performance has risen. I believe that the bank's potential has not been fully displayed yet. Miracle Banking was proposed by Dolores, so it had a special meaning to her. Dolores would naturally do her best to develop it. Meng Qinggu emphasized once again, everyone remember, the current calm does not mean it will be stable forever. With the protection of the Treants and the good relationship with the elves, we still have to rely on external help. Every moment we aren't strong is a moment we can't relax. Danger is always lurking in the shadows, so we have to be vigilant in times of peace and let Miracle City develop as fast as possible. Yes. Chu Tian hadn't participated in the young Miss meetings many times, but he never thought that the young Miss aura would be this strong. After being tempered by the chairman for over a year, she had become more and more mature, becoming a strong woman that could see the big picture. The meeting ended here. Chapter 1036. If the news of the Miracle City's city lord being assassinated in the city was spread, it would have a very bad influence. Chu Tian didn't want to destroy the peaceful scene of Miracle City, so he chose to block this news. Since no one saw it, right? Chu Tian wasn't injured at all, so he treated it as if it never happened. This matter gave Chu Tian a warning. There were some fellows who didn't give up on Miracle City. It was hard to guard against a hidden arrow. He wasn't afraid of a thief stealing, but he was afraid of a thief remembering. If it happened once, there would be a second time. The Eternal Forest's Vice Speaker Ulysses was sent to Miracle City by the Elven King to investigate this matter for Chu Tian's group. Meng Qinggu asked, "Can you find out who did it?" "It's difficult." Ulysses shook his head and said, "We've examined the corpse, but we haven't found any clues that can prove their identity." How could he feel at ease with this kind of answer? Chu Tian and Meng Yingying were almost killed, and this was in their own territory. The assassin was this strong, even having a rare spirit transformation expert. If it wasn't for Chu Tian's cultivation increasing and his new cultivation technique, who knew if there would have been an accident? Meng Qinggu asked in an unwilling voice, "To have the ability to send out this kind of lineup of assassins, I think it's most likely a few large powers. Which side do you think is more suspicious? There are spirit beasts and dark elves among the ambushers this time." Ulysses said with knit brows, "If we speculate from the races, the spirit beasts are leaning towards the Savage Highlands, but I've never heard of dark elves in the Savage Highlands. Only the Dragon's Ridge has this race." This guess had no basis and there was no meaning even if it was correct. Although there's no direct evidence, it's most likely done by them. Chu Tian stood up and said, "It's not my style to not take revenge. Miracle City could barely protect themselves, could they fight against these giant powers? They were existences on the same level as the Eternal Forest." Everyone looked at him. This fellow wouldn't want to do something shocking again, right? Chu Tian announced, "This matter is a warning. On one hand, we have to strengthen our defenses and create a city-protecting barrier as soon as possible. Other than that, every high-level member has to bring enough guards and city-returning scrolls to prevent any accidents. On the other hand, we can't just swallow this insult. We have to use our actions to tell the forest that Miracle City is not a soft persimmon that anyone can pinch. It's natural to strengthen our defenses, but how are you prepared to deal with them? These fellows aren't people we can easily provoke. If we don't deal with them properly, it will cause a large battle. Miracle City can't take another battle. City Lord Chu Tian, please don't be impulsive." Ulysses broke out in a cold sweat. The elves were cooperating with Miracle City and if Chu Tian caused any trouble, the Eternal Forest would also be out of luck. I'll say this first, the elves won't be involved in this battle. "Look at you, coward." Chu Tian revealed a look of disdain. Forget it, he didn't expect the elves to help him in the first place. Chu Tian said with a smile, "Why are you so nervous? It's not like I don't have a brain. Please be assured, I know what I'm doing, you don't need to worry about this matter." Although the news of the city lord being attacked was sealed, there were still some rumors circulating. This was because in less than 2 days after Chu Tian was attacked, Miracle City began a large-scale construction. They built more restrictions and fortifications for Miracle City, with the most typical example being the Undead Towers. The density of the Undead Towers in the Miracle Mountain Range increased by around 4 times and there were over 100 of them. Even if each Undead Tower could only control 10,000 undead, this batch of Undead Towers was enough to control an undead army of 1,000,000. As for the choice of the undead, of course they were leaning towards the skeletons. Although there were giant monsters like the abominations, fierce characters like the Death Knights, or flying soldiers like the gargoyles, they all had battle strength that surpassed the skeletons by who knows how many times. But the production and maintenance costs of these soldiers were too high and they could easily pollute the environment. The skeleton soldiers were relatively weak, but after being processed, they wouldn't bring plague or pollute the environment. It was because they were weak that they could control more. Not only would the skeleton soldiers become Miracle City's guards, they could also be used in large amounts in the mines and factories, giving Miracle City over 1 million workers that wouldn't tire out. Miracle City sent several thousand people to excavate around the death ruins. There were a large amount of remains on the surface of the death ruins and the surroundings. These remains had been soaked in death energy for tens of thousands of years, so there was a very strong energy contained within. As long as they were awakened as undead, their battle strength wouldn't be weak. Large amounts of remains filled the containers. Miracle City's airships hung the containers and sent them back in batches. Miracle Commerce sent several hundred gnome alchemists to use Chu Tian's recipe and materials to make large amounts of corpse refining medicine to soak in these bones. This kind of medicine could fix the death energy in the bones. Not only would the bones become stronger, the energy wouldn't leak out and pollute the environment. After these remains were processed, they were sent to a special place to be awakened. Several hundred Black Moon sect cultivators with innate death energy were sent over to use a secret technique to activate their soul flames and awaken the undead. One by one, the skeleton soldiers stood up. These skeletons were different from normal skeletons. Although they were still cold and terrifying, there was no energy leaking out. Their bones were pure white, looking like they were carved from white jade. Miracle City ordered large amounts of full-body armor, spears, and blades from the Great Summer Country to arm them. In the end, there were several thousand skeletons wearing hard armor and holding weapons in their hands. They were neatly lined up as they headed to their designated area. If they didn't take off their helmets, they would think they were normal soldiers. Miracle Commerce had enough resources, so they quickly produced skeleton soldiers. In just a few short days, there were already several tens of thousands of skeletons. At this time, Miracle City began to shake. A layer of gray energy rose from all directions of the Miracle Mountain Range, finally gathering in the center of Miracle City. Finally it turned into a giant energy barrier that covered all of Miracle City. The Miracle City citizens were stunned and they all began to loudly shout. Long live, long live. Miracle City also has a city protecting barrier. This energy barrier was supported by the energy from the earth veins and the death ruins. It was a super large barrier that could cover the entire mountain range. The defensive strength of this barrier wasn't bad. The most important thing was that as long as there was a barrier, any sneak attack would be much harder. Miracle City could use a smart brain to check the situation of the barrier. If any corner was attacked, it was impossible for Miracle City to not know. How hard was it to create a city-protecting barrier? Forest cities often require dozens of years to build, and hundreds of years to strengthen and strengthen. What about Chu Tian? He just connected the earth veins and released the energy from the death ruins, finally forming a large barrier around Miracle City. Don't look down on this barrier, it was equivalent to a protective umbrella. It was enough for Miracle City's citizens to live in peace inside, and it was very important to the city's security. Ian's spirit was a bit tired as she walked in front of Chu Tian. The first batch of 100,000 skeletons will be finished in another week. It's been hard on little sister sect master. Chu Tian was very satisfied with the Black Moon sect's efficiency. I think you might as well build a branch in the death ruins, this place is very suitable for your cultivation. Ian's spirit's eyes lit up. This was a very good thing. The energy in the death ruins was very strong, not only was it suitable for cultivation, it could also be used to refine corpses. This was a very ideal place for the Black Moon sect. Because the death ruins were close to Miracle City, it was very convenient for the Black Moon sect, saving them the cost of teleporting back and forth. Ian's spirit gave a soft snort. You're this kind. Most likely you want us to stay and use us to develop the death ruins for Miracle City. How can little sister sect master say this? What kind of relationship do we have? Nangong Yun came in at this time. Boss, I've finished investigating the matter you asked me to do. Oh. That fast. Chu Tian was very surprised. How is it? Nangong Yun raised her brows and said in a very impolite voice, do you still need to ask? I've already checked, the Savage Highlands is currently at war with several spirit beast countries, and they are currently in high spirits, wanting to annex them. We've reached an agreement with these spirit beast countries to sell Miracle City's firearms to them. Not only will we earn a large sum like this, we'll also make the savage highlands suffer. What about the Dragon's Ridge? The Dragon's Ridge is even easier to deal with. The Dragon Lord is very greedy and has the most cities in the Forest of Chaos, but he doesn't have his own people. They are all controlled by other races and lack cohesion, so it's hard to avoid rebellions. Recently there have been 4-5 cities rebelling against the Dragon's Ridge. We can also sell them weapons to support them in fighting against Deathwing. These people have the ability to fight against Deathwing, so if they can obtain Miracle Commerce's firearms, they will be able to hold on for a long time. Deathwing won't have time to deal with us. We'll do it like this. Chu Tian said to Nangong Yun, Nangong, Miracle Commerce's firearms business will be given to you. You will be the largest firearms dealer in the Forest of Chaos in the future. Remember, the firearms are a good card. Not only will it bring unimaginable benefits to Miracle City, it will also weaken the enemy's control over their territory. Nangong Yun was very happy. Letting her handle such an important matter, this meant that Chu Tian valued her very much. Boss, just leave it to me. After Meng Qinggu understood Chu Tian's arrangements, she naturally understood Chu Tian's thoughts. Miracle Commerce's source energy weapons had been developed for a long time and the weapons' power, production were all ready to be commercialized. This was a very profitable business and it was time to start selling them. Chu Tian sold the source energy weapons to his enemies' enemies. This was indeed a very smart method. He didn't directly fight them, but it was better than fighting them directly. Burst Claw and Deathwing were so depressed that they would spit out blood. Chapter 1037. Miracle Banking's savings business in the past only targeted groups, like the gnomes and the surrounding tribes. That was because Miracle City didn't have enough credibility at the time, so they could only work with their close allies. The situation now was different. Meng Qinggu decided to properly develop the banking business. This was an important part of Miracle Commerce's strategy. It could provide Miracle City with an endless supply of funds in the future. As for risk control, there was no need to worry about that. Meng Qinggu was very confident in Miracle Commerce's current situation. Just Miracle Commerce had too many things to invest in, so the failure rate of these investments was negligible. Miracle City's situation was already very different. Whether it was the citizens or the surrounding tribes, they all had a high sense of recognition towards Miracle City. The opportunity for the citizens to save and the currency change was already ripe. Meng Qinggu had spent quite a bit of effort to create a database of the citizens and popularize citizen cards in the city. There were already initial results and Miracle Banking received several tens of thousands of source stones. The city had around 1 million people, so the flowing source stones had to be in the millions. Even if they could only absorb a tenth, it was still several 100,000. Of course, in order to motivate the citizens to save money, Miracle Banking announced the interest rates for individual savings. They opened a current account with an annual interest rate of 5%. The interest would be generated every day and they could withdraw it at any time. As for a fixed deposit account, there were monthly, half a year, full year, 2 years, 3 years, and etc. The longer the deposit, the higher the interest. If it was a fixed deposit for 3 years, the annual interest rate would be 50%. 100 source stones in the bank for 3 years. Not only was the capital of 100 source stones not a small amount, the interest was also as high as 150 source stones. Miracle Banking also allowed people to withdraw it ahead of time, but it would be downgraded based on the amount of time it had been deposited and there would be a processing fee. It was definitely a popular financial service. The most important thing was, in the Great Zhou country, the Great Summer country, the various forest cities, and even other countries, Miracle City had a bank. Miracle Banking was managed by smart brains, with several super source energy matrices operating at the same time. The data system would be complete and after people deposited their source stones in Miracle Banking, they could withdraw it from any place with Miracle Banking. Other than that, Miracle Banking had direct spending power. Whether it was the Miracle Shopping Center, Miracle Hotel, arena, trial field, or Qilin Hall, as long as it was in Miracle Commerce's business, they could all use the card to spend, which was fast and convenient. Other than that, Miracle Banking was preparing to establish a currency system. The currency could be directly linked to source stones and could be exchanged for source stones in Miracle City. People could directly use the currency for their daily transactions, which was very convenient. Miracle Banking's transfer business was about to be tested. In the future, merchants would be able to trade with each other in Miracle Banking. This would eliminate the trouble and risk of carrying large amounts of source stones. Not to mention the fact that source stones could be stored in the bank to generate income, so why wouldn't they do it? Meng Qingguo was a strategist with great foresight. With Meng Qingguo personally planning and Dolores leading the way, how hard would it be for Miracle Banking to develop? Chu Tian had never cared about the matters of the Chamber of Commerce. The company was filled with talented people, so why did he need to worry about this? Chu Tian practiced his sword art all day, reading all kinds of books, and doing research whenever he had time. Although Miracle Commerce's research was very strong, one Chu Tian was better than 10,000 researchers. The bottlenecks that the Yun sect faced were easily broken through as long as Chu Tian made a move. The young miss was a workaholic and had been very busy recently. Chu Tian came to Meng Ying's office and saw Meng Ying sitting at the table, writing something. There were several gnome assistants helping her organize the information. Chu Tian, you came at the right time. Did you know? The number of people opening accounts in Miracle Banking has increased by several times. Meng Ying happily reported the results. We'll soon have enough funds. You're thinking of the problem too simply. Miracle Banking can't easily make a mistake, we still have to consider the risks involved. Otherwise, if there is a crisis, people's trust in us will be greatly reduced. With the young Miss' cautious personality, I'm afraid she won't dare move too much money into loans or investments. Meng Ying had never thought of this before. She slightly knit her brows. What should they do now? Chu Tian suddenly gave a sigh. Having a big business also has its disadvantages. Meng Ying was stunned. She didn't know why Chu Tian had this kind of feeling. What disadvantages? Even our Ying keeps talking about business, this doesn't seem like your personality. Meng Ying was a bit embarrassed. I just want to help everyone. My brain is a bit stupid and I can't do anything well. It's all thanks to elder sister giving me a few smart brains. Otherwise I wouldn't be able to do anything. Chu Tian grabbed Meng Ying's shoulder. Hi, then don't make it hard on yourself. If there's a problem, just leave it to the smart brains and assistants. Why do you have to do everything yourself? Meng Ying was a bit embarrassed. Right now in front of everyone, don't touch me. Ha, ha. What are you afraid of? Who doesn't know our relationship? Chu Tian's face was as thick as a wall. The gnomes were a bit embarrassed and could only pretend they didn't see anything. Chu Tian then said, Come, I'll bring you to a fun place. A fun place? Where is it? Elven Small Town is holding a gourmet exchange and Vivian sent me an invitation. Gourmet exchange? Meng Ying instantly revealed an interested look. Chu Tian continued to introduce. Several dozen elves from various towns and forests will gather in Moonshine Town at around dusk. Each elven participating will bring the most delicious food they think they have to share with everyone. Think about it, these elves all come from different areas of the Forest of Chaos, so how many delicious things will there be? Tell me, can we miss this kind of fun banquet? Meng Ying's eyes lit up. There's actually this kind of interesting event. It's said that other than the gourmet exchange, there will also be a forest fashion show, an art exhibition, and a music conference. These are all things that are rarely seen in 100 years. Chu Tian saw that Meng Ying was already very excited, so he didn't waste any more words. He directly said to Meng Ying's assistants, I'll leave the matters here to you all. Minister Meng Ying and I will be leaving for a day or two. Yes. Meng Ying was a bit hesitant. Everyone is very busy right now, wouldn't it be? What are you worried about? Not to mention nothing, even if something happens, I'll take care of it. Chu Tian's attitude was very strong. The Elven King and some other members will also be attending, so this isn't just for fun, it is to promote the friendship between the two sides and strengthen the Elven alliance. I order you to come with me as the city lord. Is that so? So it's this important. Meng Yingying no longer hesitated as she excitedly said in a high-spirited voice, we can't be careless, we have to prepare Miracle City's best food. Miracle City's food will lose to the elves. That's right, what clothes do you think we should wear? The two of them discussed as they left. The elven food exchange was indeed a rare sight. Chu Tian wanted to eat and play empty-handed, but Meng Yingying firmly disagreed. She felt this was too rude, they had to prepare human food. Finally they found the Miracle Hotel's source energy chef. The company just happened to have a level 3 high-grade demon beef. The two of them immediately agreed and carefully cooked several large steaks. Meng Yingying's exquisite face was filled with memories. I remember when we were in South Sky City, the first source energy food we cooked was steak, so this is the food that best represents us. That's right, a certain young miss was filled with passion and actually wanted to start a business selling steak. Now that I think about it, if we continued doing it back then, perhaps there would have been steak chains everywhere. Meng Yingying fiercely glared at him, you're not allowed to expose my dark history, I'm not done with you. The two of them packed the steaks while they were still hot and headed to Moonlight Town. It was unknown how the Elven King convinced the Elven Council, but although the elves built Moonlight Town next to Miracle City, the Elven Town was still closed off. Outsiders couldn't enter, so they didn't know much about the elves' lives. The entire Elven Town had a population of around 10,000 and most of them were young elves. Moreover, the elves were very rich, so there weren't many precious items in Miracle City. There were quite a few new products like cell phones in the Elven Town. When Chu Tian brought Meng Yingying to the small town, the two of them were stunned by the scene inside. Miracle Commerce's products could be seen everywhere in the Elven Town. There were giant screens, loudspeakers, and all kinds of exquisite source energy lamps. Each street was covered in a gentle glow and there were tree houses neatly arranged, with all kinds of crystal and wood sculptures arranged neatly. There were thousands of elves moving through the small town in groups of 3s and 5s, with each person carrying a full food box. There were all kinds of jams, pastries, and elven delicacies everywhere. The elves were singing around the moon well. The entire small town was very lively. The city lord is here. City Lord Chu Tian is here. Chu Tian was recognized as soon as he arrived and several hundred elves surrounded Chu Tian. Each elf had a face filled with joy and their eyes lit up like they had seen their idol. I'm from the Silver Moon Forest and I've heard your story. I really admire you. An elven girl squeezed to the front, my parents and little brother really want to see you. Can you give me an autograph? Of course there's no problem. Chu Tian picked up a pen with a faint smile, how many do you want? 1. 2, oh no, 3. Alright, I'll give it to you. The elven girl took the autograph and happily cried out, I've obtained City Lord Chu Tian's autograph, I've obtained City Lord Chu Tian's autograph. The other elves were instantly filled with excitement. I'm from the Twilight Forest and I also admire you. I'm from Green Jade City and I like watching movies. My dream is to make movies. And me. Chu Tian never would have thought that since he was famous among the elves, he would be surrounded by countless passionate worshippers. These elves all came from different forest towns and it wasn't easy for them to come to Miracle City. This was because the transport towers could easily harm the safety of the main city. The transport towers in other places had restrictions and the transport towers were all managed by smart brains. Every elf that wanted to use the transport tower first had to apply for a transport permit from Miracle Commerce. This transport permit needed to collect personal information and finally they would be given a citizen card with a spiritual imprint on it. The elf would be able to use it to transport in the future. Miracle City had temporarily restricted the teleportation area. Even if the elves obtained the transport permit, they could only teleport within their tribe or within their country, which meant they could only teleport in their own territory. If they wanted to teleport to Miracle City, Oldman's small town, or any other place, they had to clearly write down the reason and purpose of the area and apply for a special permit. They could only enter after being approved by the government of the area. Otherwise, with the transport network controlled by smart brains, these directions would be sealed and there would be no way to complete the teleportation. This exchange was very hard to come by. The elves were all representatives from various cities and they could only enter after Meng Qingwu agreed. But they could only play around in Miracle City for a week at most, so they treasured this chance. In their eyes, Chu Tian was a genius that created everything, an omnipotent idol. Chapter 1038. The matter of Chu Tian being assassinated did not even have time to brew before it was covered up by a series of things that happened afterwards. Miracle City's protective barrier was built and the 100,000 skeleton army was formed. The city's defenses were greatly increased and the firearms business was successfully developed. The continent's #1 firearms merchant, Nangong Yun, had won his first battle. The two buyers showed a strong interest in the source energy weapons. Therefore, after some negotiations, the two customers ordered large amounts of storm rifles, destruction machine guns, source energy cannons, and the new source energy weapons. These two orders added up to 500,000 source stones. In fact, the total cost of these weapons added up to less than 50,000 source stones. It wasn't hard to foresee that in the near future, the firearms business would be as important as a money tree to Miracle City. Other than that, the 1.5 million source stones from the Elven Bank were already in place. Miracle City began to give out loans to the surrounding tribes, encouraging people to start businesses. There was also a portion of loans to the company's subsidiary companies, allowing them to invest in the Great Summer Country, the Great Zhou Country, and the Northern Militant Country. They would develop large amounts of oil fields, rare mines, and factories, as well as research departments. Miracle Commerce's financial problems had already been solved. This money wouldn't even need half a year to be returned with interest. Chu Tian, the Elven Bank's physical business hall has been opened and the Elven Bank's functions have been completed. The Elven King has invited you and elder sister to the Eternal Forest to participate in the official opening ceremony. Chu Tian, who was cultivating in the Miracle Gardens, received a call from Yingying. The elves were quite efficient and the physical business hall was completed. However, this was a good thing, it would prevent more problems. The elves had already established the Elven Bank in the areas where they were active and Miracle Commerce's other facilities and technology were already in place. It seemed like the elves would be the first race in the forest to enjoy the benefits of Miracle City's technology. He had to give the Elven King face when he invited him. Chu Tian brought his followers Meng Yingying and Vivian, finding the young Miss, Dolores, and the others. They came to the Eternal Forest through the transport tower. Everyone look, this is the Elven Bank. After Vivian came to the Eternal Forest, she impatiently brought everyone in front of a building. She pointed at the building behind her like it was a treasure and said in a high-spirited voice, "Take a look." The Elven Bank was located in the center of the Eternal Forest. Just like how the elves were close to nature, the Elven Bank was mainly made of tree houses. The surface was covered in fine vines and it was as tall as a 5-story building. It was hexagonal in shape, but it was over 100 meters in diameter. It looked like a giant tree stump at first glance and it was covered in lush leaves. But, this was indeed a building because looking closely, they could see the windows and the exquisite carvings on the tree trunk. The Elven Bank's symbol was a lush ancient tree of life. It looked simple, but it was actually very elegant. The interior design was very reasonable and the smart brain's location was very hidden. There were many secret rooms that could store things, there were barriers on the outside, and there were restrictions on the inside. In short, there were many functions, giving people a safe and stable feeling. Meng Yingying couldn't help praising, the elves' buildings are very strange. There were tree houses everywhere in the elves' territory and these were the elves' most normal houses. Normal elves like small and exquisite houses, their houses were made from a kind of synthetic plant. Only the Elven King's castle had to be large enough to use various kinds of stone. There's nothing wrong with having a special characteristic. Vivian said, This is because our elven bank isn't just opening in the elves' territory, we are planning to open it in other forest cities. This kind of treehouse is not only safe, it will also attract attention. It is a symbol of the elves. There was no time to look carefully. Vivian released her spatial energy. They were all sent to the Eternal Forest's elven palace. The elven bank was about to open and the elves in the Eternal Forest came in one after another. The high-level elves were all standing in the corridor on the cliff, looking at the entire Eternal Forest. There are this many people. Meng Yingying looked down from high above. The entire Eternal Forest was filled with people, perhaps everyone had gathered here. Citizens of the Eternal Forest, this is a special day. The elven king Lancelot was wearing an exquisite elven robe and holding the forest scepter. After a period of hard work, we have established elven banks in the important areas of the elves, making every elven race member pay close attention. Today, the image transferring mirror will send this scene to every corner of the elves, allowing every elf to witness this moment. First, we'll ask Miracle City's esteemed guests to say a few words. The first to speak was Dolores. Of course Dolores' status couldn't compare to Chu Tian and Meng Qingguo, but as Miracle City's finance minister and Miracle Bank's vice president, she was the main person in charge of the bank. In the future, the cooperation with the elves would be carried out by her, so letting Dolores speak wasn't strange at all. I am very honored to speak on behalf of Miracle Bank. The elves have a strong influence, as well as a reputation that everyone on the continent praises. There is no race more suitable than the elves to establish a bank, and Miracle Bank will be the elven bank's most important partner in the present and future. We will work together to explore the new economic field and contribute to the prosperity of the continent. Next, I will announce the details of the cooperation between the Elven Bank and Miracle Bank. Dolores was speaking on behalf of Miracle Bank, so the contents of her speech were mostly on the level of the two banks. These contents were things the elves had never heard of before, so it was very novel to them. When Dolores finished speaking, the elves broke out in a wave of applause. It was Meng Qingguo's turn. Dolores represented Miracle Bank and Meng Qingguo represented Miracle City. Meng Qingguo first said a large amount of pleasantries and flattering words, making the elves feel as if they were floating. Then she threw out the real deal. Today is a good day and I want to announce a piece of good news. Actually, the cooperation with the Eternal Forest has been established before the Elven Bank was established. When the Elven Bank is established, Miracle City's logistics, transport, and information network in the Elven region will be fully covered. The elves all stood up and applauded. This news was just too great. Each of the elven brothers and sisters would be able to enjoy a better and more convenient life. Miracle City and the Eternal Forest's cooperation will become deeper and deeper. Not only will we provide the Elven Bank with technology, we will also connect the Elven Bank to all of Miracle City's services. Whether it is the shopping center, the theater, the trial field, the radio station, the communication, or even eating, shopping, or even the transport tower, as long as you have the Elven Bank card, you can do anything. In the future, Miracle City will invest large amounts of resources to create a large database of identity information, creating an identity card for each elf, making life in the forest more orderly and enriching. Miracle City will become a platform connecting the entire forest. In the Eternal Forest and the various elven cities, each elf's hands were swollen from clapping. Meng Qingguo's words filled the elves with yearning and longing for their future lives. Finally, it was Chu Tian's turn to appear. Chu Tian came to the corridor and looked down. The millions of elves in the Eternal Forest were all looking at him with burning gazes. He revealed a faint smile and cleared his throat before saying, "Our beautiful Minister Dolores and City Lord Meng Qingguo have already said everything that needs to be said, so I'll talk about something else." The elves instantly calmed down. Everyone stared at him without blinking. This is the best of times, this is the worst of times. Chu Tian's voice spread across the entire Eternal Forest through the speakers. The current world is chaotic and there are naturally endless threats. There are endless wars and killings, so people are still facing many challenges. But the continent is rich in resources, technology, and civilization have just begun. Chaos and order have not been decided yet. Every race and every person has endless possibilities. The elves are one of the most outstanding races in the world, and the elves are one of the purest and noblest races. You should shoulder the mission of this era and use your strength, wisdom, and rigor to influence even more people, letting your purity, kindness, and song spread to every corner of the continent. All living beings in this world are born in a circle. There is no species that can be isolated from the world, and the elves are no exception. You have already encountered the best opportunity in history. So, please bravely break the shackles and tear off the heavy shackles, chasing after the new elven era. The lowliest and most ordinary creature should have a dream. Don't be afraid that you can't fly high enough, because you are currently sitting on Miracle Commerce's dream carrier. Now please answer me loudly. Do you want to become a top entrepreneur? Do you want to become a popular singer on the continent? Do you want to be an artist whose name will be immortalized? Do you want to become a peak expert? The elves were instantly filled with excitement. Want. 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 Then come with us to create a new era. We'll start from this forest and start from this continent. Vivian was so excited that tears filled her eyes. Her face was completely red as she shouted with the countless elves. In the eyes of the countless elves at this moment, Chu Tian's figure was like a giant. Almost at the same time, each elven city and elven forest gave off a tsunami-like roar. It's a mess, it's a mess, it's all a mess. Augusta was so angry that his beard stood up. Landlos, do you hear that? This is a blatant violation of the ancestors' teachings. Someone come and take away this nonsense human. The loyal conservative council members also had faces filled with anger. This was because in their eyes, the human had evil intentions, actually inciting the elves to go against the ancestors' teachings. How could this kind of thing happen? If they weren't stopped, they would have sent him flying with a kick. Sir Speaker, please calm your anger. Ulysses and the others quickly stopped the enraged Augusta. The Elven King didn't pay attention to the Elven Council behind him that was in chaos, because what Chu Tian just said was what the Elven King wanted to say, but he couldn't say it because of his status and situation. Now that Chu Tian said it for him, he was very grateful to Chu Tian. Many thanks to Miracle City's 3 representatives for their words. This is a moment destined to be recorded in the Elven history. The Elven King came out to announce, I, the Eternal Forest's Master, the 43rd Elven King Lancelot, officially announce the establishment of the Elven Bank. Chapter 1039. Chu Tian was surrounded by a large group of elven worshippers, and most of them were young and beautiful elven girls, making Meng Yingying on the side very jealous. Didn't he say he was coming to the conference? He was actually here to pick up girls. Cool, cool. What are you doing? What are you all doing? The Elven Council's chairman Augusta appeared and scolded them. The elves quickly retreated. The Elven King Lancelot and several high-level members of the Elven Council had come, as well as several elven city lords. Vivian was behind them, and when she saw Chu Tian, she immediately winked at him. Vivian was very happy that Chu Tian was willing to participate in the elves' meeting. Although the speaker's face was not very good and his eyes were not kind, after all, it was this fellow who destroyed the elven tradition, so how could they hope to give him a good look? Chu Tian did not care about this at all. His face was as thick as a wall. He immediately brought Meng Yingying over to greet him with a smile. You are Miracle City's City Lord Chu Tian. Several unfamiliar elves looked at him with curiosity. These people were all famous elven characters, being city lords of elven cities. Even in the Forest of Chaos, they were considered first-class experts. These elves were not unfamiliar with Chu Tian and Miracle City. Although Miracle City's overall strength was not strong, now that they had obtained the Treants, it was hard for other powers to threaten them other than giant powers. They had become a very influential power in the Forest of Chaos and had recently become famous in the Forest of Chaos. If it's not Chu Tian, who else could it be? The Elven King Lancelot first introduced the city lords to Chu Tian before saying to Chu Tian, it's said that City Lord Chu Tian has subdued the northern Great Zhou country and has made large progress. This is truly worthy of celebration. Coming to the elven town despite your busy schedule, the elves are filled with gratitude. Mang Yingying saw the elven king being this polite and was a bit flattered. No, no, no. Being invited here is our honor. Vivian cut in and said, I invited Big Brother Chu Tian. Augusta revealed a dissatisfied expression. This was clearly an elven gathering. What was wrong with inviting a human? Today is a lively day, we shouldn't just stand here and stare. Chu Tian did not treat himself as an outsider at all. Miracle City has cooperated with the Eternal Forest for many days and it seems like there are some results. The elves of the Forest of Chaos can gather together, this is very rare. An elven city lord said with a smile, the transport towers in the forest cities haven't been built yet, so unless there are important matters for our elves, we don't even need to think about this kind of gathering. That's right, City Lord Chu Tian's skills are truly admirable. Another elven city lord gave a sigh of praise, the elves are too far behind the humans. Chu Tian immediately said, actually the humans are still the same. Working with miracle commerce in the elven language is already ahead of them, ha, ha, ha. Augusta and the old-fashioned counselors had ugly expressions on their faces. The elves had relations with miracle commerce and there were more and more elves that wanted to reform. These city lords didn't have much contact with the Eternal Forest, not even meeting once in 100 years, so they didn't follow the Eternal Forest's rules that strictly. Now the Elven King was using the transport towers to connect the various places. The Elven City Lords all stood on the Elven King's side. Chu Tian sat down with the Elven King and Mang Yingying had already taken out the steak she prepared. Everyone, come and try Miracle City steak. This is cooked by our most outstanding source energy chef. Thank you Yingying. It really is too delicious. Try our Silver Moon Forest's mysterious fruit. Mang Yingying was very beautiful and had a simple and lively personality, so it was easy to get along with people. Not to mention that Mang Yingying often used her image to make movies and these movies were very popular among the elves, so Mang Yingying was considered a celebrity among the elves. Everyone fought to give her delicious food to try. This is my cell phone number, everyone can contact me if there's anything. What? You don't have cell phones or communication devices? It's fine, we'll make arrangements early and have the signal cover the area. The elven food exchange this time allowed the elves from different areas to get to know each other, as well as letting the elves know Mang Yingying and Chu Tian. Everyone tasted the specialties and delicacies of their respective areas, quickly becoming familiar with each other. Mang Yingying decided to bring everyone to Miracle City to play tomorrow, which made the young elves very excited. The elves' spiritual life was very rich. Halfway through the food exchange, there were fashion shows, art exhibitions, tea parties, and musical exchanges. Chu Tian finally understood why the elf civilization developed so slowly. The elves never grew tired of these trivial things, especially the arts. This was most likely due to the elves' nature. The elves naturally did not like fighting, therefore their desire for power, and wealth was not as strong as the humans. Chu Tian saw the elves' enthusiasm and his heart was filled with happiness. I suggest that we hold more of these exchanges. It doesn't have to be limited to the elves, the large races of the forest and even the large races of the continent can all participate. This way we can communicate and improve. Nonsense. Augusta said with a snort, crude spirit beasts and hypocritical humans, nothing good will happen if these races are with the elves. The elves do not need to interact with these cruel and sinister races. This old man's thoughts were too extreme. Chu Tian wanted to properly teach him a lesson. The Elven King said with a smile, City Lord Chu Tian's idea isn't bad, but this transport tower is not cheap. Although the elves have free spots, if we hold a large-scale event, we might not be able to afford it. With several dozen transport towers in the forest, if they could operate normally in the future, it would be normal for them to make several 100,000 source stones a month. If there were several tens of thousands of people teleporting back and forth, the consumption would be too large. Even a large power like the Eternal Forest would not be able to afford it. Chu Tian's heart skipped a beat and he said without revealing anything, the elves are rich, would they care about this little bit of money? City Lord Chu Tian's words are wrong. An elven city lord said, the elves have never done business. Although we do have some source stones, it is the savings of our ancestors. If we keep spending it like this, we will run out of resources. Now that the Elven region and Miracle City are connected, the opportunity for us to cooperate even deeper has come. I want to work together with our strong points and conditions. The future will be very worth looking forward to. The Elven King said with a nod. The Vice City Lord Meng Qinggu has already discussed the details. The elves will be responsible for the regional communication and information technology, and the cities will open miracle shopping centers. Even if the elves don't go out, they can still buy things from all over the continent. Even if they don't need to travel, they can sell their specialties to all parts of the continent. It won't destroy the elves' ancestral teachings, and it will allow the elves to prosper. Augusta did not directly oppose this. This was the Elven Council's bottom line. No wonder the Elven Council did not stop the Elven King. The young miss already discussed the details of the cooperation. Did she really have 3 heads and 6 arms? Chu Tian's heart slightly skipped a beat and he suddenly had an idea. Actually, I have another idea and suggestion. I think it will be very beneficial to the development of the elves. The Elven King knew that the humans had many ideas, but since Chu Tian said this, of course he had to listen. What is it? Chu Tian carefully explained his thoughts to him. The Elven King's eyes lit up and he discussed it with the surrounding Elven City Lords. The Elven City Lords all nodded, like they were all in favor of this plan. There were even some whose faces turned red as they paid their respects to Chu Tian. After all, Miracle Commerce had given the elves a large amount of help on this matter. Vivian was even more pleasantly surprised. She had specially invited Chu Tian here to let Chu Tian build a good relationship with the elves. She never thought that this kind of opportunity would allow the elves to discuss such an important matter. In the future, the cooperation between the elves and Miracle City would become even closer. Chu Tian saw the elves happily accept this proposal and he was very satisfied. This was because Chu Tian understood that although it looked like Miracle City was suffering a loss, it was actually a win-win situation. Even Miracle City's biggest problem would be solved by over half because of this. The next morning. Vice City Lord, did you hear? The elves have just announced a large matter with that fellow City Lord. All of a sudden, Dolores rushed over. Meng Qinggu was busy taking care of business and slightly knit her brows when she heard this. She knew that Dolores was not a person who made a fuss over nothing, so it must be something big for her to be this excited. Why did Chu Tian run over to the elves? What did he do this time? Dolores slightly swallowed her saliva. The elves have announced the establishment of the forest's second bank and the continent's second bank, the Elven Bank. Meng Qingwu's eyes popped out. The elves were opening a bank? Was there a mistake? Meng Qingwu quickly understood the situation and was shocked by the results. The matter of the elves opening a bank was true, and looking at the benefits of the elves, this was completely understandable. This was because the elves had already connected all the transportation routes, and the Miracle Shopping Center's platform would be completed soon, and the communication platform would be completed soon. Whether it was selling resources, building manufacturing, selling specialties, or developing technology, as well as movies and entertainment, the elves would definitely have a wave of entrepreneurship. The elves announcing the establishment of a bank was to prepare for this. The Eternal Forest and the large forest cities would all invest their money into the established bank and give it to the elves as loans. Wouldn't this promote the development of the elves? Of course, this bank model was good, but it wasn't something they could do just because they wanted to. Chu Tian played a key role in this. He first announced that he would sell 10 space warehouses to the elves, allowing the elves to use them as a space treasury for the bank. Other than that, he announced that he would sell 10 smart brains to the elves, allowing the elves to create a sophisticated and intelligent bank management platform. In other words, Miracle Commerce would fully support the establishment of the Elven Bank in terms of technology. But why was this? Once the Elven Bank appeared, wouldn't Miracle Banking's limelight be stolen? After all, the elves had a large influence in the forest. Even if they didn't mention the influence of the elves themselves, just the elven cities were enough to create a large business system. Chapter 1040. The Eternal Forest's words were sent to every corner of the Forest of Chaos by the magnetic image towers and magnetic sound towers. The Elven Bank's operation became explosive news in the Forest of Chaos. The elves were ignorant of worldly matters and had been isolated for many years. Were they prepared to come out now? The various powers began to speculate. The elves were a giant in the forest and were the #1 race in the forest. In terms of cohesiveness, no other power could compare to them. Any action of the elves could change the situation in the Forest of Chaos. Thousands of elves submitted applications to open accounts and the entire race was like a flood of revolution. Actually, the elves were not completely inflexible, they had followed the teachings of their ancestors for thousands of years. They could only watch as more and more resources were stolen, more and more territory was eaten away, and more brothers and sisters were taken away by human traffickers. What did the teachings of their ancestors bring them? They were only becoming weaker and weaker and their power was shrinking. The Elven Council was high above, not being able to sympathize with the people at all. The old men were immersed in the glory of the elves and the peace in front of them, not thinking of reform at all. If the teachings of their ancestors were not suitable for the elves, why would they still follow it? The elven laws were written by their ancestors, so if the seniors had the qualifications to write it, why couldn't the descendants change it? Since they were not suitable and still followed it, wouldn't it become a shackle to the elves? It was time for the elves to do something. Chu Tian quickly returned to Miracle City after his speech to avoid being chased by those old elves. He had been paying close attention to the Elven Bank situation in the city. This was because the Elven Bank was not just a large matter for the elves, it was also a large matter for Miracle City. Chu Tian was most worried about the internal resistance of the elves, which was also the reason why he stirred up the elves' emotions. As long as he broke through the internal resistance of the elves and let the bank run smoothly, the other problems would naturally be solved. Big Brother Chu Tian, Big Brother Chu Tian. Vivian rushed back to Miracle City to report the good news, bringing everyone the battle report they needed the most. I've received the data. The Elven Bank has opened the first deposit limit and it's been filled by half in just 2 days. This news shocked everyone. Meng Yingying couldn't help asking, upper limit? What upper limit? What's the upper limit? Royal Father and the City Lords have decided that the Elven Bank's upper limit is 5 million source stones. Normal elves can't deposit right now, so it's mainly for the middle and high-level elves. Moreover, they can't deposit more than 50% of their net worth. Vivian swallowed a mouthful of saliva before saying, but even with this many profits, it's already reached 2 million source stones. The elves were truly rich. But Meng Yingying couldn't understand why there was a deposit limit and why there were so many restrictions. Wasn't this discouraging the enthusiasm of the elves? Of course Chu Tian could understand this. This Elven Bank was just an experiment for the elves. No one could guarantee whether it would succeed or not. Not to mention that if the Elven Bank took all the wealth of the elves, would it be able to spend that much money? Transferring it to Miracle Bank? Not to mention whether or not Miracle Bank could absorb that much. Even if Miracle Bank could, the Elven King wouldn't dare give half of the clan's wealth to Miracle City. If something happened to Miracle City or if Miracle City ran away, or if something unexpected happened, it wouldn't be a joke. As for the limit on who could open accounts, on one hand it was because the middle and high-level members were more resistant to risk and on the other hand it was because the Elven Bank's business hall was limited, it couldn't hold several 100,000 people lining up to open accounts, so they could only start with large customers. Rice had to be eaten bite by bite. They couldn't hope to become a fatty in one bite. Vivian said, the current 5 million source stones limit is for the clan, the Elven Bank doesn't have a limit for outsiders. There are already several cities that have relations with the elves that have sent envoys to negotiate. They seem to be preparing to open accounts in the Elven Bank in the name of their cities. I don't think it will be a small amount. Meng Yingying said in a surprised voice, it can't be, the bank has just been established and there are already other races coming to deposit money. This is very normal. Dolores didn't find it strange at all. How much influence do the elves have in the forest? Now that the elves have made a move, whether it's to curry favor or to test them, it doesn't matter if they support the elves first. Everything is going smoothly. Chu Tian was completely relieved. Our smart brain's production speed is increasing. How about we sell another batch to the Eternal Forest and let them open more banks? Vivian seized this chance to flatter him. With the smartest big brother Chu Tian in the world making arrangements, how could it not go smoothly? Nonsense, who doesn't know that? Chu Tian gave a shameless laugh. Although what you say is the truth, I am a low-key person, so you can say it behind my back, you don't need to say it in front of me. Meng Yingying almost vomited in disgust. Enough with you. This is only half the battle. Meng Qinggu lightly coughed. Even though she was happy for the Elven Bank's first victory, with her personality, she wouldn't let her guard down. Whether the banking model can truly succeed is not completely determined by the ability to absorb funds, but more importantly, whether the bank can form a virtuous cycle. This shouldn't be hard. Dolores couldn't help saying, if the Elven Bank is in trouble, they can just transfer the extra money to us. Thinking like this isn't feasible. Meng Qinggu said with a serious expression, we support the establishment of the Elven Bank because we have plans to transfer money to Miracle Bank, but this isn't the main goal. Otherwise, the elves' hard work would become Miracle City's wedding dress. This wouldn't be reasonable. The young miss is right. Chu Tian nodded. Not only do we need to establish the Elven Bank, we also need to keep it running normally. Only like this can the Elven Bank continue to expand and become the most influential bank in the Forest of Chaos. Meng Qinggu added, once our cooperation with the elves succeeds and the elves gain enough benefits, it can be considered setting a benchmark for our Miracle City. At that time, there will be no need for our foreign and commerce departments to take the initiative and there will be an endless stream of powers coming to cooperate with us. Vivian was very moved. Big brother Chu Tian and elder sister Qinggu were too righteous. Meng Yingying also supported the two of them. What should we do next? It's simple. We've already established the Elven Bank, so we'll support the grassroots elves to start businesses. Meng Qinggu said to Vivian and Meng Yingying, Princess Vivian, Yingying, your mission during this period of time is to promote the development of the elves. Yingying is the production minister, so you need to use all your resources to build factories in the elven cities and the surrounding areas, guiding the elves to start businesses. Our Miracle Commerce's technology, as long as it isn't our core technology, we can give a part of it to the elves. For example, small products like electric lights, cooking array technology, movie production technology, and etc. Yingying immediately stood up. All right, I know what to do. Vivian was also very happy as she said, you will all be the great benefactors of the elves. Don't say any more, quickly go. Chu Tian suddenly thought of something. That's right, our beauty Dolores doesn't need to be busy anymore. How about you bring a fox people caravan over to help? You have to know that the elves don't have any business sense. Dolores volunteered, I'm willing to bring the fox people to the elven area and help the elves with their business plans. Meng Qinggu thought about it and nodded, that's fine. Let's go. Vivian said with high fighting spirit, the beautiful future of the elves and the Forest of Chaos will be created by us. The three of them left the conference room. Meng Yingying went to organize the production department. Dolores went to organize the fox people. Vivian went to organize the itinerary and planning. The three of them did not come for the elves. Meng Yingying would help the elves build large amounts of factories in the elven area. These factories would be a joint venture with the elves, so wouldn't the final product be according to Miracle Commerce's will? Dolores would bring the merchants to the elven area to turn stone into gold, turning the worthless mines and resource fields into treasures. She would let the elves turn the most common local products into popular products in the shopping center, and she would train the elves to form a company that would depend on Miracle Commerce in the end. The more prosperous the elves were, the more prosperous the forest was, the more prosperous Miracle City was, and the more prosperous Miracle Commerce was. This was a virtuous cycle. After several days, the Elven Bank was filled with the first 5 million source stones. The elves had a long lifespan, and to the elves, 3 to 5 years was nothing. Therefore, most of the deposits were over 3 years, which meant that it was hard for the elves to redeem large amounts of their deposits in a short period of time. What was shocking was that the deposits outside of the elves were also close to 1 million. These were deposits sent by several cities, with each city having over 100 to 200,000. This wasn't much to a city, but they could express their goodwill to the elves and test the waters, so they were willing to take it. There was too much money. How could the Elven Bank spend it? In order to maintain their operating costs, the Elven Bank took out 2 million for 5 years and transferred it to Miracle Bank for 5 years. Miracle Commerce's 5-year interest was double that of the Elven Bank, so just the interest from this transfer was enough to cover the Elven Bank's entire interest costs. The Elven Bank began to try lending to the elves. Something that the Elven King and the cities never expected happened. The elven cities were more enthusiastic about applying for loans than they expected. There were those that wanted to open a potion shop, those that wanted to open a talisman shop, those that wanted to sell herbs, those that wanted to sell leather, those that wanted to open a factory, and those that wanted to open a mine. There were even more arts and entertainment businesses, like the Elven Source Energy Restaurant, the Elven Film Studio, the Elven Trial Field. There were more than they could imagine. How could the elves not trust their own people? The elven race was rich in resources and had 1,000 things to do. As long as they were willing to take risks and start a business, as long as they had a bit of brains, they would not suffer a loss. The Elven Bank was very lenient towards their own people, they didn't even need a mortgage. As long as there were projects and people, and the loan application was reasonable, they would all accept the loans. In the end, they released 200 loans in a few days, totaling more than 1 million source stones. The Elven King was so excited that he almost couldn't sleep. They didn't release a sum of source stones, but rather seeds. He felt that his goal of reforming the elves was getting closer and closer. The elves were so enthusiastic, how could the Elven King and the various cities not support them? They immediately opened the Elven Bank's deposit service and increased it by 5 million. The Elven King didn't care about the gains and losses. Even if they lost everything, as long as the elven race could be changed, it would be worth it. This was something that couldn't be bought with money. Not to mention that with Miracle Commerce's supervision and Smart Brain's risk control, the possibility of the elves losing money was very small. The elves would be the biggest beneficiary of this reform. Chapter 1041. The Elven Bank attracted a large amount of attention. The elves in the Forest of Chaos had already multiplied for tens of thousands of years, they were one of the oldest races in the area. Although the elves had been shrinking in the last 1 to 2,000 years, they still had the strongest influence. Even if the Dragon Lord, the Titan behemoths, dominated an area and their influence wasn't weaker than the elves, they were far from being able to control a group. Once the elves obtained Miracle City's technology, they would be the most suitable and qualified power to open a bank. It was because of this. Once the Elven Bank was opened, would there still be a matter of Miracle Bank? The elves had over 10 forest towns and several large forests under their control. Their territory would far surpass Miracle Bank and they would instantly become the #1 bank in the forest. This kind of large cake, how could Miracle City be willing to give it away like this? Meng Qinggu was not in a rush to give an opinion. She understood Chu Tian's personality very well. Chu Tian's thoughts were always jumping around, but he would never suffer a loss. Chu Tian must have his reasons for doing this, so what was he thinking? Meng Qinggu suddenly trembled. She seemed to have guessed Chu Tian's thoughts. Dolores, don't be anxious. This matter might not be a bad thing for us, let's see the situation first. Dolores was also stunned seeing that Meng Qinggu didn't have much of a reaction. This fox person was very good at business, but she had grown up in a tribe in the Forest of Chaos for a long time, so her experience and knowledge couldn't compare to Meng Qinggu who had been in charge of Miracle Commerce for over a year. When Meng Qinggu didn't show the expected shock, she couldn't help feeling a bit suspicious. On the other side, Vivian was in high spirits. The Elven Bank was prepared to be established in the Eternal Forest, and the Elven King would be the chairman. The various Elven cities' city lords and her who held the position of Miracle City's vice city lord would all become the vice chairman of the Elven Bank. This momentum was something that had never been seen before. The elves' influence and reputation were among the highest in the Forest of Chaos. With the elves' strong support, it was only a matter of time before they became the #1 bank in the Forest of Chaos. Vivian didn't have a very good business mind, but she knew how important it was to control the entire forest's capital. The elves of the Forest of Chaos would have a lot more influence than right now. The elves of the Forest of Chaos could even become a large financial group that could influence the continent. The day the elves became rich was right in front of them. Wasn't this what Vivian had been looking forward to? But Vivian was a bit embarrassed. Big Brother Chu Tian supporting the elves like this, wouldn't Miracle City's benefits be greatly harmed? Miracle City has its own technology to establish a bank, so as long as Miracle City has enough time, Miracle Banks will cover the entire forest sooner or later. Vivian was an elf, of course she wanted the elves to be better. But Vivian was also a member of Miracle Commerce and was Miracle City's vice city lord. She was very loyal to Chu Tian and Miracle Commerce, so naturally she couldn't bear to destroy Miracle City's benefits for the elves. Chu Tian pretended to be carefree as he said, "For our Princess Vivian, what does it matter if Miracle City suffers this little loss? You can be assured, I'll take care of this matter for you. I'll make you a great hero of the elves, a great person that will lead the elves to become rich." Vivian was very flattered and flustered. How can this be? We can't let down the company. I appreciate Big Brother Chu Tian's good intentions, but how about I talk to my royal father and we can discuss this matter later? Otherwise, I really don't know how to explain this to elder sister Qinggu. Vivian, don't listen to this fellow's nonsense. Meng Yingying couldn't stand it anymore and immediately pulled Vivian to the side. You've been with us for this long, don't you understand this fellow? I don't believe that this fellow who won't wake up without benefits will suffer a loss, so don't worry about it. Chu Tian gave a few loud laughs. Miracle City doesn't have a dictatorship, so we don't have this ability. Sometimes sharing some benefits will allow us to gain more. Just wait and see. Vivian didn't really understand. Chu Tian was indeed not a person who would suffer a loss. Vivian was filled with gratitude and admiration for Chu Tian at the same time. When the news was sent to the various elven cities and elven forests, it immediately excited countless elves. This was because the elves had been stagnant for too long, so opening a bank for the entire race was an epoch-making feat. The Elven Council had some objections, but the Elven King and the Elven City Lords fully supported it. The Elven citizens had voted for it with over 90% of their votes, so the Elven Council couldn't go against the citizens. Not to mention that the elves didn't leave the forest, which was in accordance with the law. The plan was being prepared like a raging fire. This bank couldn't be opened without Miracle City's technical support because this was a very important matter, so the high-level members of Miracle City had to discuss the details of the cooperation. Chu Tian only proposed a plan. The ones truly in charge of the negotiations were the Vice City Lord Meng Qinggu and the Finance Minister Dolores. The two of them were the City Lords and Vice City Lords of Miracle Bank, so they could represent the company and Miracle City, as well as Miracle Bank. The top-secret meeting lasted for 3 days. Finally, Miracle City and the Eternal Forest made a joint announcement. The elves would officially open the Elven Bank and Miracle City would support the elves with all their technology. Other than that, the two sides would exchange shares. The Eternal Forest would hold 10% of Miracle Bank's shares and Miracle City would hold 10% of the Elven Bank's shares. The details of the cooperation between the two sides were kept secret, but the two banks would exchange shares. This would undoubtedly send the message that the Elven Bank was not a competition with Miracle Bank, but rather a cooperation. Miracle City and the Eternal Forest would become even closer because of this. Dolores' attitude changed 180 degrees. She was confused and even angry at first, but she suddenly became enthusiastic. Under Dolores' urging, the elves changed their procrastinating style and immediately began the bank ceremony in the Eternal Forest. Because the elven territory was already covered in signals, there were various broadcast channels and videos, so the elves were paying close attention to this matter. Could they not pay attention to this? This was a large matter that shook the elves. At the same time, it was a large matter that shook the entire forest. Meng Qinggu had people record the entire process because perhaps this would become valuable information for future generations. This allowed many elves that couldn't come to the Eternal Forest to watch the ceremony to watch it through the image transfer mirrors. It was a live broadcast that was sent over. The various city lords all gave their speeches. The Elven Council also recognized the legitimacy of this matter. Finally, the Elven King personally announced the establishment of the bank. In that instant, the elves were all hugging each other in celebration. The Elven Bank was announced by the Eternal Forest and several elven towns participated at the same time. The model was the same as Miracle Bank, first taking in deposits with interest and then lending them out at a higher interest rate. Although the interest rate was the main source of income, it wasn't the only source of income. Other than that, there were income from services and intermediate businesses, like the fees for withdrawing money from other places, as well as future guarantees, rentals, pawns, and other services, as well as new ways of making money that hadn't been discovered yet. After the Elven Bank was established, before the bank was even built, they announced the interest rate for deposits. The Elven Bank's interest rate was much lower than Miracle Bank's. The interest rate for current deposits was only 2% a year and the interest rate for monthly deposits was only 3%. Half a year, 1 year, or even higher, they weren't even half of Miracle Bank's. Although it was like this, it was still high enough. Before the Elven Bank was established, the first deposit had already been made. This was directly invested by the Elven officials. The Eternal Forest directly deposited 500,000 source stones and the other elven cities deposited several hundred to 200,000 source stones. In other words, the bank had just been established and it had already taken in over 2 million source stones. This was just the deposit from the elven officials. Miracle Commerce had a close cooperation with the elves. After the Elven Bank was established, they could open a bank card and directly use the Miracle Shopping Center and the various businesses of the company. This was very convenient for their lives and it was also convenient to take care of their assets. The elves were a very united race. The elves had absolute trust in the Eternal Forest and the Elven King. The Elven Bank was a large change for the elves. Therefore the elves would support it without any hesitation. Not to mention they wouldn't suffer a loss, so why wouldn't they save money? Would the Elven Bank have less deposits at that time? The elves in the Forest of Chaos were over 20 million. The elves had a guarantee of credibility. The elves had a guarantee of strength. The Elven Bank had several million deposits when it was established and it would wildly grow in the future. Moreover, with the Eternal Forest and the large elven cities as guarantees, it was impossible for the elves to swindle people. Would the large forest races worry that the elves would cheat them of their assets? The tribes in the forest would definitely come to the Elven Bank to deposit their money. No matter how strong Miracle City was, it was still a bit weak. How could it compare to the elves? So as long as the Elven Bank developed smoothly, it would be able to suck away most of the Forest of Chaos source stones. But for a bank to grow healthily, it couldn't just rely on deposits. If the bank had large deposits and couldn't find large amounts of loans, the deposits would become a burden. The income and expenditure would not form a virtuous cycle and the interest on the deposits would cause the bank to lose money. Then there was a problem. Where could the elves find all these projects? The elves had just begun their internal reforms, so how could the elves apply for loans that quickly? Not to mention that with the Elven Bank's absorption speed, the elves alone couldn't use it all. Then what should they do? They couldn't just let the large amount of reserves keep losing interest in the bank. The Elven Bank's best method was to take the large amount of source stones and transfer them to Miracle Bank with a certain amount of interest. This method not only avoided the Elven Bank's risks, Miracle Bank's interest rate was higher than the Elven Bank's, so the Elven Bank could earn quite a bit. Miracle Bank's situation was the opposite of the Elven Bank. The elves had enough funds but lacked projects. Miracle Commerce had high-quality projects but lacked funds. The elves had a large enough reputation and influence, but Miracle Commerce didn't have enough strength and was developing slowly. Now with this method, wouldn't they be able to make up for each other's weaknesses and gain benefits together? After the Miracle Commerce high-level members understood this, they finally knew Chu Tian's goal. Chapter 1042. The Elven Bank's momentum was very good, allowing the Elven King and the Elven City Lords to feel assured. When the Elven Bank announced an increase in deposits, they also decided to increase the number and scale of the banks. It would be best if they opened banks in other cities, obtaining more deposits. This would increase the influence of the elves and they could use the wealth of other races to invest in the development of their own race. Just thinking about it made people excited. Want to expand? This definitely couldn't be done without Miracle Commerce's technology. The young miss very generously waved her pen and sold another 20 smart brains for a friendship price of 400,000. Was it very dark? This was a top product of the Smart Brain Company, wasn't it up to Chu Tian's group to decide how much it cost? This price was not considered expensive. With the Elven Bank's current momentum and power, even if the price was doubled, the elves wouldn't buy it. The young miss considered long-term benefits and disdained the small benefits in front of her. The company could produce 5-6 smart brains a day, which could satisfy their needs. In the future, the production of smart brains would only become faster and faster, so they couldn't let it affect the popularity of their allies. This was a very important and profitable product. Miracle City's current situation was that while they were wildly selling weapons to give the Savage Highlands and Dragon's Ridge a headache, they were also selling smart brains to allow the Eternal Forest's elves to quickly develop, restricting their enemies and increasing their allies. Whether it was the source energy weapons or the smart brains, they could all bring benefits to Miracle City. After the Elven territory was opened, Miracle Commerce's other products like cell phones, theaters, and source energy foods were all advancing. Moreover, they followed the elves and continued to expand into other areas, which was definitely a very profitable business. Not to mention the fact that the Elven Bank had started so quickly, there were large amounts of money that couldn't be digested being transferred to Miracle Bank. A portion of this money was used to create new factories and resource fields, creating stronger production and resource channels. A portion was given to their own company to quickly develop new products and technologies, while the rest was invested in the Three Kingdoms with the Great Zhou country as the main market. The company formed a virtuous cycle. Its influence spread to more forest cities and to more kingdoms. However, the faster they developed, the more they couldn't be careless. Miracle Commerce was becoming stronger and stronger. Not only were the Forest of Chaos powers sitting on pins and needles, they were most afraid of attracting the attention of the peak powers on the continent, like the large empires. That was not something Chu Tian could resist. The company had to become stronger. Miracle Commerce and Chu Tian didn't have much time. The people of Miracle City were all working hard. Nangong Yun had turned into an arms dealer and was selling arms. Feng Kaidai and Yunya were opening up the market. Meng Yingying, Vivian, and Dolores were in the Elven area. Qin Bingyu and the others were developing in the Great Zhou country. Dongfang Haran was busy training troops for Miracle City, and there was no need to mention the young Miss Meng Qingguo. No one was here and the young miss didn't have time to care about him. Chu Tian felt very bored, so he took the elevator to the underground base to see how the work was progressing. The gnomes' underground research base had changed a lot. This was because the gnomes didn't need to manage the city and everyone could come here to do research. There were also large amounts of scholars from the Yun sect, bringing large amounts of Miracle Commerce's top technology, so it was much more lively than before. Sir City Lord. The city manager Zero automatically notified Clark and he quickly came out to greet him. Why have you come here? Chu Tian casually looked around. I'm here to inspect the work and to see how the projects are doing. Clark, is this place still good? Is there enough research funds? It's enough, it's enough. Vice City Lord Meng Qingguo doubled the base's funds yesterday. We've never had this much money before. That's good. How are the divine servants being strengthened? Please come with me. In a secret research room, there were 18 divine servants. They were all placed in containers and were undergoing further modifications. According to Sir City Lord's requirements, we've purchased large amounts of materials to modify the divine servants. These divine servants have already been infused with a very strong energy, and I estimate that after this modification, these divine servants' strength will reach the 6th true spirit layer. The 6th true spirit layer was already considered an expert in the Forest of Chaos. There had never been a puppet that was this strong before, not to mention that the divine servants themselves were not simple. If this modification was successful, Chu Tian would have these 18 divine servants by his side and his strength would increase by a large amount. This doesn't matter. With money, resources, and time, how hard is it for them to grow? Chu Tian was not surprised at all. What I want to ask is, how is the research on the implanted consciousness going? Clark gave a bitter smile. City Lord, this is too difficult. I'm afraid it can't be done in a short period of time. The entire Source Energy Computer Research Department has been moved here. I can't be satisfied with your answer. Chu Tian was brought to an underground castle. This underground castle was an independent existence that was different from the other castles. It had the highest level of security and defense because this was the research center for the Super Source Energy Computing Matrix. It was already larger than the Great Summer Country. The Super Source Energy Computing Matrix was one of Miracle Commerce's most important technologies. The Yun sect's researchers had all been moved here, and adding in the gnomes, there were over 5,000 people and each one was an elite among researchers. This kind of investment was something no other department could have. At this moment, the several hundred laboratories in the research center were all busy researching the matrix. A super source energy computing matrix was made up of several source energy matrices, and each matrix was made up of several hundred source energy arrays. This was the source of the source energy computer. In the beginning, Sir City Lord provided the core technology and the Yun sect scholars worked day and night, investing large amounts of time and energy to finally create the source energy computing matrix, only the matrix was not perfect. In the past few months, our research center has been investing more and more. Our focus is on breaking down each matrix and improving the source energy arrays. This is a very large project, but it's a good thing we have a lot of people and now we have smart brains help, so our efficiency has increased by a lot. We've upgraded Zero several times and its calculation speed has already reached 40 cycles. However, this increase is based on optimization and strengthening, it is not a qualitative change. The research center's biggest breakthrough is the microchip and the matrix language. Chu Tian already understood most of the breakthroughs in these areas. For Miracle Commerce's first cell phone, this cell phone actually contained Miracle Commerce's newest core technology. There was a microchip embedded in it as the central processor, and this central processor was called a microchip. The microchip's size was reduced and its computing power was very weak, so it couldn't be embedded with intelligence. Without a core consciousness and instructions, how could this microchip operate? For this reason, the research center worked with the Yun sect to create something called the matrix language. The matrix language could be used by computers. Using the matrix language to program, it could form all kinds of instructions. The cell phone was more flexible and had more functions. This was because the research center used the matrix language to create a very simple operating system. The matrix language had a lot of room for improvement. In the future, even if the computer matrices were not given artificial intelligence, they could use the matrix language to create very complex systems or functions. This could be considered a large step forward for the computer research center. These things being researched was not for the cell phone at first. Did Chu Tian want to create a kind of implantable intelligence that could be implanted into a puppet? Was this matter easier said than done? The research center had just developed a microchip that could be used on normal equipment. With the company's current technology, it was impossible to implant it into a living being or puppet. Chu Tian asked, "What is the biggest bottleneck?" There are two main bottlenecks. One is the lack of technology, so we can only solve it with time. The other is the problem of materials. If we want to make a smaller, faster, and better matrix, we need to find a better carrier. Chu Tian passed by the raw materials room. Large amounts of transparent crystal chips were neatly arranged and each piece was a single source energy array for the source energy matrix. If there were hundreds of these crystal chips stacked on top of each other and combined them in a three-dimensional manner, they would form a single matrix. With many of these matrices connected, they would finally form a complete super source energy matrix. Very complex, very complex. Different materials had different carrying capacities for the source energy array. If they could find a better material, perhaps they could shrink it by 10 times. This material had a large industrial requirement and Miracle Commerce still had a hard time meeting this requirement. When Chu Tian was thinking of a solution, the entire underground base shook a few times. Chu Tian was a bit stunned. What happened? Is there an earthquake? Impossible, there wouldn't be an earthquake in this place. When the gnomes built the underground base, they used large amounts of shock-absorbing stones to reinforce the underground space, so the vibrations in the ground should be absorbed by the shock-absorbing stones. Therefore, an earthquake shouldn't affect this area. Clark suddenly thought of something. Something's wrong. The vibrations seemed to be coming from the devil's maw. Chu Tian teleported nearby with Clark and the two of them were shocked when they saw the situation. They didn't know what happened in this area, but it had already turned into a mess. Giant pythons that were dozens of meters thick slithered around. Fierce and terrifying underground creatures were wildly charging out of the devil's maw. The gnome guards were caught off guard by this sudden invasion. It was a good thing Miracle City had equipped them with source energy weapons and several heavy machine guns were able to resist. Large amounts of dark creatures are charging in. We can't hold on much longer. Chapter 1043. Father really is a 100% genius. It was just a spur-of-the-moment idea and it had this kind of effect. The young miss contacted Chu Tian with her cell phone. The Eternal Forest and the Elven Cities had prepared the first deposit for the bank and now they were preparing the transfer procedures. She had Chu Tian go to Moonshine Town to sign the agreement with the Elven King and also had Chu Tian bring the smart brain to the elves. Even Chu Tian never thought that this matter would go so smoothly. The Elven Bank had 2 million source stones, but because the Elven Bank had just been established, they couldn't use this much money. Therefore, they took out 1.5 million and transferred it to Miracle Bank. This was because Miracle Bank's interest was double that of the Elven Bank. Even if the elves didn't dare do anything, just eating Miracle Bank's interest was enough to support the Elven Bank. They could simply lie down and make money. Moreover, this was just the initial deposit. The elves would accumulate more and more. Anything the elves couldn't digest would be transferred to Miracle Bank, so would Miracle Bank be short of money? I've already placed the smart brains I want to sell to the elves into the space warehouse. Meng Yingying ran over to find Chu Tian. She wanted to sign the contract with Chu Tian in Moonshine Town. 1.5 million source stones. Miracle Bank has an additional 1.5 million source stones. This is too incredible. That's right. Who would have thought it would be like this? Chu Tian was supporting the Elven Bank on the surface, but it was actually giving Miracle Bank large benefits. The things Miracle Bank wasn't good at were given to the Elven Bank and the things the Elven Bank couldn't do, Miracle Bank would take care of them. This was a win-win situation, a happy result for everyone. Chu Tian didn't know what modesty was at all. How is it? You're shocked. What did the young miss and that fox say? Meng Yingying replied, Dolores said that your move this time was very beautiful, instantly solving Miracle Commerce's financial problems. Even elder sister has to admit that you played with your capital too beautifully this time. You actually thought of using a backdoor to develop, solving several problems at once. Chu Tian gave an insolent laugh, so don't blame this brother for not managing things normally. It's not that I don't want to manage things, it's just that I'm too strong. Once I make a move, you won't have anything to do with me. Meng Yingying pinched him and fiercely rolled her eyes. Stop being so smug. Of course it wasn't that Chu Tian was smart. Chu Tian didn't have a particularly sharp sense of business, but he had tens of thousands of years of experience. Even if he couldn't innovate, couldn't he just copy it? This was a very common method of operation in the future. The two of them arrived at Moonshine Town. The elves had been waiting for a long time. In the eyes of the elves, Chu Tian was simply their savior. The Elven Bank did not just give the idle elves something to work for, it also gave the elves motivation. They believed that with the elves' abilities, this bank would become better and better. 10 warehouses, 10 sets of smart brains, 300,000 for a friendship price, including after sales and upgrades. Do you have any objections? No problem, I hope we can work together in the future. It was rare that Chu Tian didn't rip them off. Whether it was the warehouses or the smart brains, they were not for sale and there was only one of them in the world. Even if Chu Tian asked for a sky-high price, the elves couldn't do anything about it. Selling it to the elves for 300,000 this time, it wasn't an exaggeration to say it was a friendship price. Smart brains are an important part of the bank. Chu Tian said to the Elven King and the Elven City Lords, because smart brains have the logic of intelligent beings, as well as strong calculation, thinking, and memory abilities, not only can it keep the space treasury safe, it can also store the information of the bank's users. No matter how complicated the data is, there won't be any mistakes. Other than that, it can also serve the bank's users, analyzing the bank's deposits and expenditures, evaluating the feasibility of loans, calculating profits, reducing bad loans, and controlling risks. The elves felt dizzy hearing this. But it was enough to understand a little. The elves weren't good at calculating and doing business, but smart brains could allow the elves to have no worries. Very good. Within 3 days, we'll send the source stones to Miracle City. The Elven King was in a very good mood. After all, he had completed a large change for the elves. As for the bank deposit agreement and details, we've already discussed it with Vice City Lord Meng Qinggu. This contract needs your signature. Of course it needed Chu Tian's signature. This was a large deposit certificate in the millions. Chu Tian looked over it. There was a total of 1.5 million source stones and it was divided into 4 parts. 1 part would be stored for 5 years with the most interest, 1 part would be stored for 3 years, 1 part would be stored for 1 year, and there was a small part that would be stored for future use. There was basically no problem. Chu Tian placed his spiritual imprint on the contract. I wish us a happy cooperation. The Elven King carefully put the contract away. The elves will remember this favor. How about you come to the Eternal Forest and we'll properly entertain you? Ha, there's no need for that. Chu Tian gave a yawn. The Elven Bank is about to be established and I think your Majesty the Elven King is busy enough, there's no need to bother you with these small matters. There are still matters in Miracle City, so I'll be leaving first. This is also good. The Elven King said to his daughter beside him, Vivian, send off City Lord Chu Tian. Yes, Royal Father. Vivian brought Chu Tian and Meng Yingying out of Moonshine Town. Her face was red from excitement as she danced around describing what happened over the past few days. The elves are the largest beneficiaries of this cooperation. The Elven Bank will play an important role in the Forest of Chaos in the future and the elves' influence and strength will increase. But the elves don't need this much money at all, so there will be a lot of idle funds being transferred to Miracle Bank. We can all earn a large profit. Big Brother Chu Tian's idea is too great. The Elven Council didn't stop it, that surprised me a bit. The Eternal Forest's Elven Council has some complaints, but they can't change the hearts of the people and the various city lords. In the end, they could only helplessly accept it. After all, there were no losers in this cooperation. The Elven Council has been in contact for a while, enjoying the convenience of the transport tower and the benefits of the communication technology. Actually, their attitude has already changed quite a bit. Not only could the elves use the Elven Bank to increase the value of their resources, it could also help the elves. Business loans, cultivation loans, and other kinds of loans were all related to the elves' lives, allowing the elves to live better lives. The elves could control the Forest of Chaos capital through the bank. If even the money was in the elves' hands. Wouldn't it all depend on the elves' face? Miracle City seemed like they were giving up control of the Forest of Chaos capital, but they were actually borrowing the elves' reputation to speed up their development. So what if the Elven Bank occupied the entire Forest of Chaos in the future? They had already collected enough funds for miracle commerce and the Miracle Bank had already spread across the continent, so why did they have to keep their eyes on the Forest of Chaos? The Elven Bank was a good thing for the large and small forces of the forest. Because they had a reliable and trustworthy power to take care of their property, they could use it in different areas, which was very convenient for business. They could also use the Elven Bank's card to make purchases and enjoy a good stable income. When their cultivation reached a bottleneck and was about to break through, they could take a loan to break through. When their business encountered financial difficulties, they could take a loan to ease the pressure. If they had the ability to start a business but didn't have money or resources, they could apply for a business loan. All of these things improved people's lives. The elves, Miracle City, and the forest races, all three sides were happy. The Forest of Chaos was not a lawless land and Miracle City couldn't establish an influence like the Eternal Forest in the Abyss in a short period of time. Rather than wasting time developing the market, it was better to give the market to more suitable people. Now they had reached an agreement. Miracle City and the Eternal Forest had become inseparable allies. The cooperation between the two sides would become deeper and Miracle City's position in the Forest of Chaos would be solidified. This was the result Vivian wanted to see the most. Chu Tian had once again created a miracle. I'll use spatial movement to send you back. No, there's no need. Meng Yingying shook her head and said, I'll directly go to the nearby industrial area to see how the new intelligent factory is doing. Chu Tian waved his hand at Vivian, all right, you are the Vice City Lord and the Elven Bank's Vice Manager, I need your help right now. Quickly go, don't disappoint me. Vivian's back was straight as she loudly said, yes, please be assured. Vivian won't disappoint Big Brother Chu Tian. After saying goodbye to the two of them, she immediately teleported back to the small town. Chu Tian accompanied Yingying to inspect the new factory and the two of them were in a very good mood on the way. Especially Meng Yingying, she simply couldn't believe it. They had a special meeting a few days ago. The financial pressure that everyone had been under, so much pressure had actually disappeared this easily. Meng Yingying said to Chu Tian, Miracle Bank has obtained this much money, we can invest in the company on one hand, as well as the Great Zhou country and the Northern Militant country on the other. I believe that the company's scale will quickly increase. Was there even a need to say this? When Chu Tian was prepared to speak, he saw the cell phone in his pocket ring. When Chu Tian picked it up, he was very surprised. The one calling him wasn't the young Miss, Nangong, or anyone else, it was actually Zero. Sir City Lord, Smart Brain number 2 detected an unusual life fluctuation half a minute ago. It is currently near you and is suspected to be an outsider expert, please be careful. Unusual life fluctuation. Chu Tian slightly knit his brows and immediately became vigilant. Almost at the same time, he released his divine sense and in that instant, he felt a strong and dangerous killing intent. Chu Tian grabbed the stunned Yingying and jumped away. The place he had just been standing was instantly blasted open by an invisible force. This is bad. There's an assassin. Meng Yingying's expression fell when she saw this. Chapter 1044. The underground life forms and the surface life forms usually minded their own business. What was wrong with these fellows? They were all wildly charging over like they had taken aphrodisiacs. But it wasn't important why the monsters came. The dark life forms were very dangerous and their numbers were unknown. This exit was connected to Miracle City's research base, so once large amounts of dark life forms charged into the research base, it would bring immeasurable losses to Miracle City. Stop them. Chu Tian jumped out of the abyss and his hands swept out at the same time. Two extremely fast sword chi instantly intertwined as they shot out, instantly tearing apart a giant centipede. Before he even landed. Sword. He released his source spirit. The demon god's sword was as black as jade. The sword hilt was engraved with patterns and the sword body was covered in inscriptions. It was surrounded by a destructive power that released a terrifying aura that made people's hairs stand on end. Chu Tian reached out to grab the sword in his hand and thrust it at the entrance of the cave. Large amounts of sword chi turned into several hundred black treasured swords that bombarded the entrance of the cave like a storm. Several dozen dark creatures were killed on the spot. The city lord is so strong. He has this kind of destructive might with this kind of cultivation base. The gnomes were very shocked by Chu Tian's strength. The phaseless sword was very strong, but it couldn't be casually used because it consumed too much energy and its killing power was too strong. It was only suitable as a killing move, not suitable for group battles or prolonged battles. While Chu Tian was practicing the phaseless sword, he had studied large amounts of the great Zhou country's heavenly sword sect's inherited sword art. There were several first-class sword cultivation techniques among them. He extracted the essence from this vast sea of sword techniques and finally used his own experience to create a sword art called the Heart Sword. What was the Heart Sword? There was no sword in his hand, but the sword was in his heart. It didn't matter if Chu Tian lost the Netherworld sword, he didn't need to rely on normal items. Chu Tian had a powerful vision domain divine sense and combined with the heavenly sword sect's sword control path. The sword came from the heart and the soul was the sword. As long as his divine sense didn't stop, the sword would never stop. There were more and more dark life forms. Large amounts of unheard of species appeared. A strange iron beetle broke through a rock wall and came out of it. It let the wild storm of source energy bullets hit its body, but it didn't fear smashing through 4-5 gnome warriors as it charged forward. Chu Tian sent out a slash. The strange iron beetle was cut in half on the spot. The destructive sword chi flew out several dozen meters and cut apart a strange scorpion. Chu Tian held the sword in his right hand and a fireball appeared in his left hand. He threw it at a group of moths and the fireball instantly turned into a sea of flames. This flame was not like normal flames, it just disappeared with a flash along with everything it touched. The large moths that were charging forward suddenly disappeared without a trace. This is bad. Clark loudly shouted at this time, there are still too many of these monsters, our people can't stop them at all. Giant centipedes, strange iron beetles, black snakes, scorpions, there were countless underground monsters that kept coming out. Although there were quite a few gnomes stationed here, facing this kind of fierce attack, it was still a bit hard to resist. These underground life forms were very fierce and there were many of them. There were even some that had true spirit realm battle strength. Chu Tian knew that if they continued to resist, the gnomes would suffer heavy casualties. Should he retreat? Then the base would be in danger. While Chu Tian was weighing the pros and cons, the rock wall above his head was suddenly cut open. Several tree roots drilled through the thick rock layer and fell into the underground space. These tree roots quickly grew, turning into small tree ants that were 3-4 meters tall. It's Cenarius. Chu Tian already knew that Cenarius wasn't weak, but he never thought he would be this strong. Everything that happened in this deep underground base, he could sense it from the surface and he could even summon several clones to help him fight. Cenarius was one of the peak experts in the Forest of Chaos, so even if his clones came, they would be very useful reinforcements, greatly reducing the pressure on the gnomes. At this time, the elevators in the underground base quickly moved and large amounts of Miracle City experts arrived under Dongfang Haoren's lead. Zero's efficiency was very high. When Zero knew the situation here, he immediately went to find reinforcements. Chu Tian broke out in laughter, you've come at the right time. Dongfang Haoren saw that the situation was critical and didn't waste any words, destroy those damn insects, don't let them take half a step forward. Miracle City experts were sent over in batches. Although the monsters were very fierce and powerful, they weren't strong enough. After fighting for an entire half an hour, the Devil's Maw was already covered in corpses. It should have been the large amount of their kind dying that made them panic, so these fellows didn't come here anymore. Chu Tian left a group of people to defend and he went back to the city to discuss this with Meng Qingguo. This was not a small matter. If there were countless insects crawling out of the ground, it would be a large threat to Miracle City. Dongfang Haoren came over to report, we've roughly calculated it. We've just killed over 30,000 dark creatures and there are over 10 different species. Over 10 different species? Meng Qinggu was a bit confused. Why are there so many? Dongfang Haoren was also confused. What makes us feel the strangest is that these underground dark creatures should be natural enemies with each other. Meng Qinggu tightly knit her brows. Could this be controlled by someone? Controlled? I don't think so. Chu Tian did not find any suspicious traces. These monsters are rushing to crawl out. It seems like they are running for their lives. Running for their lives? If our guesses aren't wrong, there should be a large change underground that caused these dark creatures to panic, making them run for their lives. Meng Qinggu was a bit uncertain. We don't know anything about the Forest of Chaos underground world, but this matter can be big or small, so we can't just ignore it. We'll immediately recruit a group of warriors to investigate the underground world. This was a must. If they knew that there were so many insects hiding under their feet that could crawl out at any time, they wouldn't be able to sleep well in the future. The young miss is right, but there's no need to recruit warriors. It's not good to have more living people, so I'll personally go to the depths of the underground world. Chu Tian recommended himself, but he knew that the young miss would not agree. After all, the underground world was a completely unknown space and it was not wise for an important person like Chu Tian to take the risk. So, he immediately added, because the underground world is mysterious, it's best for me to guess. My cultivation technique and abilities are enough to protect myself in any environment. If we were to recruit some stupid forest warriors, I don't think they would find any valuable clues and get lost inside. This was also reasonable. With Meng Qingwu's understanding of Chu Tian, she knew that since Chu Tian brought this up, he was not discussing it with her, so it was useless to stop him. She could only give a sigh and say, then you have to make your preparations. You have to bring the little fox and the city returning scroll. Young miss can be assured. I haven't married Yingying yet, how could I be in a rush to have an accident? Meng Qinggu fiercely looked at him. You only think about Yingying and never think about anyone else. In front of everyone, why are you being jealous? Dongfang Haoren was a bit embarrassed and immediately cupped his hands to leave. Meng Qingwu's face turned red and she snappily said, I'm about to be angered to death by you, come with me. Chu Tian was brought to a secret room. Meng Qingwu took out 2 bottles of pills and gave them to him. This is the company's newest True Spirit pill. Although the price is not cheap, the effects are very good. As long as one doesn't surpass the True Spirit realm, a single pill can instantly recover all their spirit energy. Other than that, there are many precious materials added to this pill, so taking it often will increase one's cultivation base. Miracle Commerce's new technology and products were shining too brightly, almost overshadowing some of the traditional industries. Actually refining talismans was a very profitable business and Meng Qingwu had never thought of giving it up. She had learned a lot of knowledge from Chu Tian and had formed a talisman research center with the gnomes. In the future, these traditional businesses would bring large profits to Miracle City. The true elemental Dan was the most recently developed Dan. The cost to refine this pill was very high, with each pill costing around 10,000 source stones. Not only was it a top-quality recovery pill, it was not inferior to a high-grade sacred pill. It was also very pure and did not have any repulsion, so it could be used for a long time. Because it was very expensive, this pill was not suitable for mass sales. Meng Qingwu had refined these 2 bottles, both of them were prepared for Chu Tian. Chu Tian was very touched by this. It's good that the young miss has done this much for me, I really can't repay you. Meng Qingwu snorted, it's good that you know this. Be more careful in the future, you have to be fair, do you understand? Ah. What are you being, about, why aren't you going to prepare it? Meng Qingwu gave a snort before swinging her sleeve and leaving behind a few angry words, I still have a lot of official business to take care of. Chu Tian didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The young miss was usually very dignified, but when she became unruly, she was not inferior to Nangong Yun at all. Only she never showed this side to normal people, so this was her true nature hidden under her outer appearance. He definitely had to explore the underground world. Chu Tian was clearer than anyone else that there was a giant empty space under the forest of chaos. Hence, the underground world here was probably much larger than anyone could imagine. This was a space completely different from the surface. What was the underground world like in this era? What level had the underground civilization of this era developed to? These were all questions that Chu Tian wanted to understand. Fox, prepare yourself, we're about to leave. He didn't bring anyone with him this time, only bringing the little fox. The little fox had been eating and drinking in Miracle City every day and its furry body had become a bit fatter, so it was time to bring it out to lose some weight. Chapter 1045. Miracle City had several times more undead towers than before the war and there were 2 more smart brains monitoring the city's life fluctuations. Not to mention Miracle City had large amounts of powerful treants and many elven experts, their defensive power could not be compared to before. Therefore it was very difficult to sneak into Miracle City and launch an attack. Now that these ambushers could sneak past the outer layer and bypass the treant's defenses, it was enough to show that they were not ordinary people. When Meng Yingying was taken away by Chu Tian, she immediately released her mirror source spirit and released the power of the spatial mirror dagger. The 2 of them instantly disappeared. Meng Yingying's innate spatial energy was not her own, so she couldn't control her direction at all. Adding in the urgency of the situation, she directly teleported several miles away, just temporarily escaping from the assassins. The entire process happened in a split second. She didn't even know what the ambushers looked like. Of course the other side didn't have time to chase them. Chu Tian said in a surprised voice, "Your reaction is quite fast. So dangerous, how could there be assassins sneaking into Miracle City?" Meng Yingying quickly said, "I have to have Zero send people to protect elder sister, otherwise it would be too dangerous for these people to hide in Miracle City." Before she even finished speaking, the spatial energy was in chaos. Several powers arrived and several masked people surrounded the 2 of them. There was no aura coming from them at all, they were clearly experts that could hide their auras. They also used spatial energy. Innate spatial energy users. There was not even 1 in 10 million innate spatial energy users. No matter what country or power, they were priceless treasures and were all focused on being cultivated. This kind of precious and rare talent was given this kind of dangerous task. They didn't hesitate to risk their lives to kill Chu Tian. This was definitely a price that only the top forces at the level of giants were willing and able to pay. Even paying this kind of large price to assassinate him. This showed how much importance they placed on Chu Tian. Where did these scoundrels come from, actually coming to Miracle City? Meng Yingying didn't need the other side to make a move to feel how strong these assassins were. Their cultivations far surpassed Chu Tian and her, therefore they wanted to stall for time. No matter how skilled they were in sneaking in, once Zero found a strange situation, he would immediately call for help. In at most a minute, it would be hard for them to escape. But these assassins were much more experienced than Yingying imagined. How could Yingying's little trick them? Before they even said 2 words, a black-robed masked person released his power. Chu Tian and Meng Yingying felt the space around them turn into a paste. There was an invisible chain that they couldn't break free of that instantly locked down the entire space, making it impossible for them to move. That's right. It was him. An innate spatial energy user. This was not a normal restriction, but rather a spatial level restriction. With Chu Tian and Yingying's cultivation and strength, unless they were stronger than the other side, forcefully interfering with the space to make the restriction ineffective, it was impossible for them to escape. However, this assassin with innate spatial energy was at least in the 7th to 8th true spirit layer. This was a true spirit transformation expert. The 2 of them completely lost the ability to move. The other black-clothed man released his source spirit and a large amount of black energy rose up, instantly condensing into a black cloud above his head. This black cloud covered the entire area in a very short period of time. Darkness attributed source spirit. It was another rare source spirit. It was no wonder they could smoothly sneak in. The darkness could block detection, and with the spatial energy's ability to move, even if Miracle City's warning system was several times stronger, the result would be the same. The black cloud could block other people's senses, so even if Miracle City sent reinforcements, they wouldn't be able to find them in a short period of time. They could only rely on themselves now. The problem now was that the experts surrounding Chu Tian and Meng Yingying were all existences with terrifying strength. Spatial source spirits and darkness source spirits, perhaps they were all experts in the spirit transformation realm. The other four were slightly weaker, but they were still existences in the peak 6th true spirit layer. In other words, any one of their cultivations far surpassed Chu Tian and Meng Yingying. Kill. The 6 assassins cooperated flawlessly. The spatial expert blocked and the darkness expert blocked. The 4 assassins attacked and the 6 of them moved at the same time. In this situation, even a peak 9th true spirit layer expert would find it hard to escape. In this extremely dangerous moment, Chu Tian suddenly turned golden and the 6 black-robed assassins were invaded by a terrifying divine sense at the same time. This divine sense was definitely the strongest they had ever encountered in their lives. It seemed like the divine sense also contained this kind of power, as the 6 of them were covered in blue and white flames at the same time. Netherworld Ghost Flame. Chu Tian's netherworld flame was no longer a normal netherworld flame, it had been nurtured by the Spirit King's body for 10,000 years. It had swallowed the abyss hell flame, swallowed the black flames of death, and swallowed the ice spirit sacred flame from the ice eye. The netherworld flame was not something normal people could imagine. Even if the 6 of them had thick spirit energy and cultivated protective secret techniques, they couldn't ignore it. Ah! The 4 weaker black-robed assassins were frozen in place by the divine sense and their protective spirit energy was destroyed. The flames crawled into their bodies like maggots in their bones. The 4 of them woke up and had to give up their attacks. They used escape techniques at the same time, barely escaping this calamity. Divine sense could also contain physical attacks. This was just too shocking. The dark race expert was very fast and countless dark clouds gathered to form a current that submerged Chu Tian. Chu Tian could feel that this was a flow of dark energy. It had all the characteristics of dark attributed energy, corroding, swallowing, and polluting. If they were submerged by this energy, Chu Tian and Meng Yingying would die without a doubt. The spatial expert's reaction wasn't slow either. The spatial energy around him became even stronger and a chain covered in spatial runes appeared, which was the image of his source spirit. Spatial chain source spirit, no wonder it had such a strong restraining power. In terms of source spirit strength, this person's source spirit wasn't strong, but because it was a rare spatial attributed source spirit, it was very precious. Otherwise, if it was Vivian with a spatial source spirit that was close to a god-level source spirit, there was nothing in this world that couldn't be cut apart. Chu Tian would have been cut into several pieces by the spatial energy. The spatial expert's power became stronger and the spatial chain began to twist like a snake. This power seemed like it wanted to pierce through space and nail Chu Tian and Meng Yingying to death. Chu Tian and Meng Yingying were still bound by the spatial energy, not being able to move at all. Meng Yingying's face turned pale, this situation wasn't good. But at this moment, Chu Tian gave a cold snort and his golden eyes indifferently looked at the assassin. Endless purgatory. The spatial expert was shocked to find that everything around him had disappeared. When he came back to his senses, he was in a scorching desert, and most of his body was buried in the boiling yellow sand, unable to move. This was because a large number of ants had appeared in the surrounding sand dunes, and each ant was the size of a fingernail. Illusion technique. Spiritual illusion technique. The spatial expert knew that he had fallen into a spiritual illusion technique, but he had no way of escaping it. Tens of thousands of ants flooded over like a tide, entering his eyes, nose, mouth, as well as any place on his body that could be burrowed. There were some that couldn't find any holes, so they bit through his flesh to burrow in. In just a few short minutes, his entire body was filled with bloodthirsty ants. These ants didn't just eat his flesh and organs, they even bit his bones bit by bit. The pain of 10,000 ants biting his body was worse than any cruel torture. When he couldn't take it anymore and thought it was over. Suddenly, everything disappeared. He was buried once again, but his body in the sand had become two. Both bodies had senses and he seemed to realize something as his eyes quickly became filled with fear. As expected, the ant tide appeared once again and everything was repeated. This time he had to endure double the pain. Then 4 times, 8 times, 16 times, 100 times, 1,000 times, 10,000 times, 100,000 times. This spatial expert already didn't remember how long he had been in the infinite reincarnation spiritual space. With this repeated and deepening torture, his mind had already been completely destroyed. Ah! In reality, Chu Tian only took a glance at him before blood flowed from his 7 orifices and he fell to the ground dead. Chu Tian's eyes returned to their normal color because launching this kind of attack consumed a lot of his energy. He couldn't use his divine sense for now. This kind of troublesome spatial expert had died for no reason. No matter how high the quality of these assassins was, they still wouldn't be able to accept this fact, so they were stunned for a moment. It was in this moment that Chu Tian regained his mobility. Chu Tian recovered his mobility and immediately gathered his strength, turning his eyes white. Phaseless sword finger. The dark attributed expert felt a cold killing intent enveloping him. In his panic, he used all his strength to resist, but it was all in vain. His head flew off like a dandelion. 2 spirit transformation experts had actually died in Chu Tian's hands. The strangest thing was that no one knew what Chu Tian had done. The 2 of them seemed to have died for no reason. When the other 4 assassins saw this, they didn't dare to continue fighting. They had seriously underestimated Chu Tian's strength, so they immediately used their evasion technique to escape. The 4 of them flew in different directions, thinking that they could escape without a trace. Suddenly, the earth rumbled. 4 thick and sharp tree roots soared into the sky, piercing through their protective spirit energy like paper. The 4 peak experts didn't have the ability to resist at all as they were pierced to death by the tree roots. Was it Cenarius? It could sense what happened here from the miracle gardens. Chu Tian revealed a smile. Even if he couldn't win, these assassins wouldn't have been able to successfully assassinate him. After a while, the various Miracle City experts arrived. The Elven King also arrived with Vivian, but the battle on this side was already over. The entire process was short, but there was no danger. Chapter 1046. All the forest races knew that there was a rich and vast world under the ground, but as for what this world was like, even the most ancient elven race in the Forest of Chaos did not know. Legends say that it was a world that never saw the light of day, giving birth to hundreds of millions of dark species. There were also large amounts of creatures that should have been extinct that survived, making the underground world a very dangerous place. There were also legends that the underground world was a paradise. When the great ancient world shattered, large amounts of treasures and demon gods' secret realm were buried inside. There were even legends that the underground world was connected to the world of death, with countless terrifying demons running amok inside. In short, the underground world was completely different from the surface world. Whether it was the living environment or the ecosystem, they were all different like heaven and earth. Therefore, the underground world's creatures rarely participated in the battles on the surface. Of course, it was the same reason, the surface creatures had no interest in the underground world. There was no information and no map to guide them. Chu Tian directly explored the unknown. Wasn't this a bit too careless? No one knew what would happen underground, and no one dared to guarantee what they would encounter underground. City Lord, have you really thought it through? Clark sent Chu Tian to the Devil's Maw cave. The gnomes have tried to map out the space around the cave, but they have failed every time. You have to know that the Devil's Maw is only the entrance to the underground world. It is several hundred miles away from the true underground world. That's right. It wasn't the height, it was the depth. Who knew what was several hundred miles down? Who knew if there was a path to the underground world? Not only was the underground world filled with unknown dangers, the environment was also very complex. It was not something a normal person could imagine. Even the most legendary adventurer could be lost forever inside. Relax. Chu Tian patted the scrolls on his belt. I've made all the preparations, we have to go this time. Stop being so fussy, let us go. Yes. Even a peerless beauty like the young miss can't stop me, so how could a short and ugly old man like you still be fussy? Clark had no other choice but to let him go. After the monster riot, the Devil's Maw Cave's defenses had increased. Whether it was weapons or manpower, they had increased several times to prevent something like this from happening again. I think it would be better to build an undead tower here, making it easier to set up a monitoring station. Chu Tian suggested before entering the cave, because the undead tower has the ability to detect living beings, it would be able to warn us if the monster wave breaks out again. Not to mention that an undead tower can control tens of thousands of undead skeletons, so these undead skeletons that don't fear death are the best guards. Understood. The Devil's Maw was very different. Chu Tian knit his brows as soon as he walked in. Damn, why is it so smelly? There were large amounts of evil eyes around here, but they had all gone into hiding. As for those that hadn't gone into hiding, they had turned into corpses. Other than the monsters that lived in this area, the entire cave was filled with the corpses of creatures that had never been seen before. It was simply like a messy slaughterhouse. Large amounts of dark creatures would attack and swallow each other during the riot. The little fox sniffed around like a dog, digging out quite a few crystal cores from the corpses and swallowing them like snacks. Chu Tian was very impatient. Stop eating, quickly look around. Where did these creatures come from? I want to find the source. The little fox shook its head. What? You can't find it? The cave was too chaotic and there were tens of thousands of creatures coming and going. The cave itself was very complicated and the little fox had no way of finding where they came from through their auras. It could even be said. These monsters did not come from the same place. The little fox's aura tracking method could not find the right path. You waste only knows how to eat, you can't do anything at the critical moment. With such a large cave, how can I find the exit to the underground world? Chu Tian's criticism had no effect on the little fox. This little fellow had been with Chu Tian for a long time, so its face had already surpassed its master's. In this short amount of time, the fox had eaten at least 100 beast crystals. How was this an adventure? It was simply a picnic. Miracle City's underground base was around 400-500 meters deep. This depth didn't count for anything in this world, it was just the surface of the continent. Now they needed to find a path to the underground world in this complex environment. Although the high-energy minerals could release light and the energy and light could stimulate the underground plants, the deeper the energy was, the more negative it was. It had a strong corrosive effect on the surface creatures and the strong energy radiation was enough to kill them. It was true that the underground plants could produce breathable air, but more than that, they released all kinds of poisonous gases that could kill people without them even knowing it. For ordinary cultivators, not to mention searching for the underground world, it would take a lot of courage to explore a place full of caves and abysses. But Chu Tian had already made up his mind. He had to find it no matter how hard it was. Chu Tian swallowed a few pills that he personally refined and then picked up the fox as he began to move. There was no map and no clear route, so he just had to go deeper. The entire space was like a large rock that had been corroded. It was like a beehive, but also like an ant's nest. There was no pattern to the inside, there were all kinds of precious ore veins, all kinds of underground plants, and all kinds of dangerous underground creatures. There was one question that everyone was curious about. Why didn't the underground space collapse after tens of thousands of years? This was because there were two kinds of power supporting it. The first was the energy released from the Earth's core and the Earth's veins that strengthened the ground. Each stone here was as hard as steel, forming a strong material frame. The other was the energy field that covered the underground world. Even if the main physical support was destroyed, this bubble-like energy field could support the underground space. The little fox took out its divine eye to scan its surroundings. Chu Tian followed the little fox's instructions and avoided the dead ends. One man and one beast began to explore the underground world. Chu Tian didn't know where he was, and Chu Tian didn't even know if the underground world had been opened, but Chu Tian continued to go deeper. The spatial ability was very useful. Chu Tian could easily pass through obstacles that were hard to pass through, and he could avoid some dangers. This greatly increased his speed and efficiency. I've seen a ghost. Chu Tian was exhausted as he sat down on a large rock to rest. He took out a true spirit pill from his chest and quickly recovered his consumed spirit energy. We've already walked for a day and a night, right? Why haven't we found anything special? Apart from the messy dark creature nests. In the era of 30,000 years in the future, Chu Tian had gone to several underground kingdoms on the continent, but Chu Tian had gone to the underground kingdoms through the transport array, so he didn't need to personally explore the thick ground. Not to mention the large changes in the earth after 30,000 years. Most of the underground world had been destroyed and the remaining underground kingdoms had been modified. Chu Tian's body was covered in dirt and his hair was a mess. Although with the little fox's divine eye, Chu Tian's spatial ability, and divine sense, he could avoid the monster nests every time he came in contact with them, it was hard to avoid a few battles along the way. Basically, any creature that could survive in such an environment would definitely not be easy to deal with. These few battles made Chu Tian feel very embarrassed. The little fox was still playing with its large eyeball, but this time the little fox's eyes suddenly lit up like it had found something special. It immediately jumped up and danced, using its claws to point in a direction. Chu Tian looked in the direction the little fox was pointing at. This seemed to be an underground canyon that was filled with extremely dense dark energy. All kinds of dark purple and dark red crystals grew all over the rock walls and paths like bamboo shoots. Normally, a place like this was the territory of a dark monster. Are you sure you didn't make a mistake? This kind of place isn't easy to walk through. The little fox was very sure that this was the right place. Chu Tian did not have a better choice. Since this fellow was this certain, then he would give it a try. Perhaps there really was a way out. It was as Chu Tian expected. The energy here filled the entire space, far surpassing his imagination. Under that thick dark energy, not only could Chu Tian's divine sense not spread out, he felt like he was soaked in acid, his body was being corroded at every moment. Chu Tian took out a purifying pill and swallowed it. We have to leave quickly. On the left and right sides of the underground mountain range, there were actually thousands of large and small holes. This made Chu Tian feel a bit bad. When Chu Tian reached the center of the tunnel, the entire canyon began to tremble. One by one, 2-meter-long creatures crawled out of the cave. These creatures seemed to be some kind of ant-like creatures. Their bodies were wrapped in incomparably sturdy black carapace, but they had a pair of forelimbs that were as sharp as blades and translucent wings. Almost in the blink of an eye, thousands of such dark creatures surged out of the nest. Demon ants. Chu Tian recognized these rare creatures. Damn, look at what you're pointing at. The demon ants looked like ants, but they were actually demon beasts with a demon bloodline. The demon ants were fast and had strong attacks. The demon ant's carapace was a very rare and precious material because this carapace could block divine sense. Even with Chu Tian's vision domain divine sense, it was hard to find the demon ants beside him. How could Chu Tian deal with this many demon wings? He quickly teleported away. The energy here was too strong and Chu Tian's divine sense couldn't locate further, therefore it greatly limited the distance he could teleport. He could only teleport 1,000 meters away and the ant swarm was already gathering above his head. Wang, wang. Several thousand demon ants let out a strange sound at the same time. The demon ants' most dangerous attack was like this. When they met their natural enemy or prey that was hard to deal with, the demon ants could connect several hundred to 1,000 of them together, releasing a large spiritual wave. This spiritual power was very strong and the surrounding mountains began to tremble.